Right. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. If you're new around here, deal is go sign up for Kipper Money. Join us in the chat over on X, and we'll get you guys hooked up with some Quai. Um, yeah, happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. Man, already off to a good start. Welcome everybody who's tuning in. Uh, Gotta get my Bundaberg ginger beer opened up. In celebration of Matt O, one of the regular audience members of this stream, Australian family-owned Bundaberg ginger beer. Found this at the old HEB here in Texas, and it's quite tasty. Quite tasty. Let's see here. Where do we even begin? Where do we even begin? Let's go to my bullet journal to start. We got a lot going on. Prepping for some events, live streaming, Quiet Spaces, all the above. We got a lot going on. So, Quiet Nation chat was earlier today. We can mark that off. That was a good one, guys. Quiet Nation just keeps building, keeps growing. We're on the live stream right now. Already gained at least one follower today, so shout out to those of you who are tuning in and following the account. We are gearing up for some Tangem hardware wallet giveaways. These are Quiet branded Tangem hardware wallets. So once this account reaches about 1,000 followers, we're going to give away some of these Quiet branded Tangem wallets, limited edition, never to be sold ever again. So if you missed out, there's going to be some more opportunities in the future to get your hands on some. Obviously, the team has a stack, I have a stack, so keep your eyes peeled for all of that. There is a poker tournament happening in Discord this Saturday, so we'll be giving away some Tangent wallets for some of the winners of the poker tournament. GM Matt O, GM, I was just, I don't know if you caught it. I don't know if you've heard of this brand. I'm drinking some Australian family-owned ginger beer, Bundaberg. Oh shoot, it says invert bottle before opening. I didn't even do that. I should probably swirl this around when I get closer to the end there. Craft brewed over 3 days. Dang, I love a good ginger beer. Dang, I should have inverted it. I need to like actually read the label and drink ginger beer like a sophisticated person from Australia. Um, Reminds me of Hefeweizens. Real Hefeweizens. Weizen? Hefeweizen. From my time in Germany. What was one of the brands? I drank a number of them. Polliner was a good one. There was another one. This one right here. I don't even, I need to see the full label here. What do we got here? Yeah. Oh, come on. Can we zoom in on this? France, Franzischer. Anyways, Polliner's great. This one right here, that's the one I used to drink in Germany. And I was at German sniper school, eating some pizza with the instructors when they taught me you got to swirl the beer at the bottom there. You got to swirl it, get all that good stuff at the bottom. I'll have to give that a shot with this Bundaberg. Bundaberg. Let me know if I got that right, Matt O. Welcome to the chat, everybody. You know the deal around here. We love handing out Quai, getting more folks turned on to Quai Network, the last blockchain, if you will. Matt says it's awesome in Queensland. Yeah, roll the bottle before open. They're famous for their rum. Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I missed that part. I'll roll it around when I get closer to the end. So I can actually see it. Yeah, there's some goodness down there at the bottom. I missed out. Definitely have to roll it around when I get closer to the end. It might be a little stronger. Might be a little stronger than intended, but a little bit of kick of ginger in the mouth never hurt nobody, right? Go long on Quai. Innovation is the key. Strong, committed team, community, the new home for miners. 100%. You rock, Matt O. Thanks for the tips on how to drink a Bundaberg ginger beer. Same kind of deal goes for the Hefeweizens from Germany. Good stuff. Good stuff. I'm ruined, guys. I'm absolutely ruined. Um, joined the military when I was 21 years old, or 22. 21, 22. Never really drank that much, but then got shipped off to Germany, and that's where I learned to drink. I learned to drink in Germany, and then when I got back to America, only thing anybody ever wanted to drink was IPAs, and it was the most disgusting thing in the whole world. I absolutely hate IPAs. They're absolutely terrible. I don't understand why people drink them. But now I don't even drink anymore. I'm alcohol free, like the cool kids. I know, I'm lame. My fiance and I have stated that if we ever end up in Munich for Oktoberfest, we'll drink there. But yeah, that's where I'm at. Goodness, down at the bottom, like Binance yesterday, talking about mining. Yeah, what's going on with the markets, guys? Okay, so like, let's reset here. We got some stuff to talk about today for sure. First of all, this SOAP dashboard. If you've been following closely, you might be a little shocked by the numbers here. I want to call out if you weren't tracking, Ravencoin had a halvening recently, right? So if you're looking at all these blocks, you'll notice Ravencoin are the majority of the blocks that are coming in. And the halvening wasn't yesterday; it was actually over the weekend. So you can see here right now, a Ravencoin block is about 1,250 Ravencoin, valued at about 875. And I wonder if this goes back far enough. But you can see here in a minute if we go back, yeah, far enough. Okay, here it is, 2,500. So somewhere about. See here, this is January 18th at 5 a.m. in the morning. Boom, right here. We go from 2,500 Raven coin per block at about 20 bucks a pop down to 1,250 Raven coin per block at $10 a pop. So, Raven coin revenue has been cut in half. Just that's kind of the deal with Ravencoin. What's interesting is Kapow hash rate continues to climb while Shaw and Script are flattening out. Okay, so some other things are happening quite clearly. Yesterday, the community was super interested in all the volume that was happening on MEXC. There was upwards of $80 million in volume on Quai Network on MEXC, the exchange, the centralized crypto exchange, and the price was relatively flat. So let's look at a 7 day here. Yeah, so if we look at 1 month, you can see we started flattening out around January 13th. And this is when, the community noticed our volume was quite high. It has calmed down since then. And the prices started to decline as well. So I suspected that there were some bag holders uh, that have been around since launch that were looking for an opportunity to get out. Um, but as more eyeballs and sophisticated players come into the network, it's really difficult to know for sure what's happening here. Um, that being said, I expect this to turn around quite quickly. We still have more Quai being burned every day, so um, and hash rate climbing on Kapow and spiking all over the place on Shaw and Script. The other thing we like to keep our eye on is profitability here. Okay, so Grin is making a comeback. I saw that earlier on either a Red Panda or Rabid Mining stream. Grin is definitely making a comeback. So, um, not the top most profitable GPU token to mine, but still, I mean, these are great numbers, guys. So, uh, not really sure what's going on with Grin. It's interesting. It's interesting. However, back to the ASICs, Shaw and Script, Quai Network is still at the top. Still at the top of Shaw, still at the top of Script. So, I think miners are more miners are definitely getting interested in Quai Network. There's going to be some, on ramps for some new miners, as more miners come up to speed, learn more about the network, cut their teeth on this 2 week lockup. Um, but yeah, guys, uh, everything's still looking pretty good. Uh, in other news though, like let's just look at the market writ large. I've been getting notifications all day of Bitcoin tanking, of Ethereum tanking. Look at Tether. Even Tether. Look at this. Let's dig into this a little bit. Like yeah, that's not terrible, but something's happening. Something is happening. Not really sure. We're gonna dig into it today. What's going on in the market, Matt? Oh, what do you think's going on in the market? Ethereum though, almost it looks like it dipped below 3,000 for a second. Or yeah. What are we looking at? We look at yeah, 24 hours. Yeah, it dipped below 3,000. Bitcoin is also going down. So something's going on in the market writ large, right? So I definitely expect, you know, as Quiet Network grows and more people get introduced to the network and start to add it to their portfolios, we will, you know, uh, ultimately be a little more impacted by what's happening in the news as Quiet Network infiltrates more and more portfolios out there. So overall, uh, you know, nothing's changing on the team's end. Everything's still moving forward. SOAP is still humming, generating revenue and buybacks for the token. So if you're wondering what's happening, you are in the same boat as me right now. Um, Matt O says just driving for 20. Okay, shout out. CS:GO, what's up, CS:GO? Welcome back to the stream. Let's get you hooked up. See you hanging out in Discords as well, guys. Discord server is a lot of fun these days. What do you think of the Discord community, CS:GO? Let me know. Let me know. Nice. Got yourself hooked up with Kipper Wallet. Kipper's pretty cool, right? Uh, it's definitely an entertaining experience, and I've become heavily addicted to tipping. So we'll be doing a lot more of that. Let's see what's going on in the community. Da, 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 da. Oh, dang. Is there what? What? Uh-oh. What is happening right now? So much is going on at once. Here we go, guys. Tune into this. Tune into this.
People have said in the past that like Bitcoin is like energy money, basically, that's often like a phrasing that I think has been applied. Um, but I think like this concept of like you know, to exist as living creatures, we need to be acquiring energy. We need to be externalizing entropy, removing entropy from our environment.
I
This is
live
like
for
Carl
these
Friston's work on
conversations,
active
guys.
inference, is like this minimization of local entropy. Or am I framing that wrong? I mean, do you guys see the connections between, in my mind, it's like this connections between like price signals and value in an economy sense, and then also just like this kind of thermodynamic constraints on like living systems and organisms in general.
Yeah, no, we think deeply in the same way. We think there's a lot of parallels here. Let me address the Bitcoin point, and I'll let Steph address maybe the other.
So real quick, FYI, we've been talking a lot about Andrew Cote lately because he was the one that wrote this really great thermoeconomic paper that related back to Quai.
Analogies. Specifically with Bitcoin, when they refer to it as energy money, um, what you're effectively trying to do is you're trying to create a token that represents a certain amount of energy, right? If you look at sort of a very first order concept
God,
of an energy based
couldn't have planned
economy,
this
you might
better.
come to the
Guys,
idea that
feel
you need
free
to
to
trade
drop from the
kilowatt hours
stream and
directly
go
in sort
join
of
this
kilowatt
stream,
hour form.
please.
The problem with that is that there simply isn't enough kilowatt hours in existence instantaneously to run the economy. And kilowatt hours then in true form have both a physical representation and a temporal and a locational representation, right? So a kilowatt hour in California isn't the same as a kilowatt hour in West Texas. Getting it from one place to the other isn't free, um, et cetera, et cetera. So when we think about energy-based money, if we just think about trading kilowatt hours, there's not enough of them, and they're not easily, inexpensively stored, and they have these properties that make them not really fungible, right? So once we get one level up from that, we can say, okay, is there a mechanism by which we can uh, fairly and accurately represent energy or previously expended energy as a token, um,
Mm-hmm.
as a numeraire, so to speak, and then can we use that as the representation in the economy, right? And Bitcoin kind of figured out how to do this a little bit with proof of work, right? So when you look at Bitcoin, people have to mine blocks to mint Bitcoin, and the price of the market price of Bitcoin tends to want to converge to the production cost, which is largely dominated by their energy input over time. Now they're not instantaneously linked, but they do tend to converge over time. Now that would make then Bitcoin kind of appear to be energy money like. However, there's one other piece to Bitcoin, which is the monetary policy, which are these halvenings, right? So initially you got 50 Bitcoin per block, and then every 4 years it halves. Right now you're getting 3 1/8 Bitcoin per block. Um, or 3 1/4, I think it is. So the point, though, is because of that sort of deflationary monetary policy, if we look at the total market cap of Bitcoin, it actually far exceeds in representation the amount of energy that has gone into Bitcoin in aggregate. right? So although instantaneously the process of mining gets us this connection between energy and the token value, because of that sort of artificial and arbitrary monetary policy that creates that deflationary curve, the market price strays away from the production cost over time. So then Bitcoin doesn't sort of represent energy money anymore over the longer time frame because of that deflationary curve.
Hmm.
If that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, and it kind of makes me think. I mean, like, for if we call Bitcoin this energy-based currency just because its primary factor or its primary cost of production is the price of energy. I mean, aluminum is like an energy-based currency because half the price of aluminum is the embodied energy, and like energy is like it's the most important commodity input into every productive process on the planet. Any kind of metal refining process or extraction is extremely energy intensive, so it's kind of, I mean, this, I think this is the thing. Maybe we can get into this in a minute, but it's kind of like we want energy to be as cheap as
Why did the
possible,
crypto trader
um,
carry a
always
kipper
getting cheaper in time. And
everywhere while
that's, I mean,
exploiting
that's
the
this
Quai
this
network?
plot that I think I've farmed for so much engagement on Twitter, which is just this plot of like countries. There's no energy poor rich country. That all wealth is downstream of energy. And like actually, like historically looking back, like Industrial
Not bad,
Revolution,
CSGO.
that
Not bad.
led to an explosion of population and a decrease in poverty and decrease in starvation because there's
Reward
so much more
stayed
energy
salty.
available, right? Um,
Energy over a
and so I guess
million
this is
wipes
this
from
is
the
why I
stock
think this
market.
idea is so
Yeah,
interesting and
man, what
powerful
is
because I think if
happening
it's
right
done
now?
right,
I gotta dig
we
into
kind
this,
of
but
we kind of
guys,
have this like
Andrew
interlock between
Cote,
like what we're
Steph
trying to do as a
McCurdy,
civilization
and
and
Dr.
survive,
K on a
and
live stream. Go
how
check it
we
out.
incentivize
I
economic
retweeted it.
actors to go out
These are
and
the
do stuff in the
conversations
world
that crypto should be
where they
promoting.
have to be, for a business venture to be profitable, it is like adding to the net increase in energy in some way. So I don't know what you think about this stuff, like in this kind of like this kind of econophysics or this almost like philosophy of economy perspective. Like, do you see the economy is like an energy heat engine, or is this like too simplistic?
I do. Um, Econophysics, there's thermoeconomics, there's kind of a term that's thrown around. Um, I'll start with the place that I
Jesus.
think you led well to,
What's
which is
happening?
you're pointing out
Like,
thermodynamic
what
constraints.
news
I
are
think
we selling
constraints are
today,
the right
guys?
way to just get a grasp on what is possible and what is
And
not
if I'm yelling,
possible,
I
and then
sincerely apologize.
evolve a system through those fields of constraints or opportunity sets, and you get to what Carl's talking about, Dr. K is talking about at this cultural level. But I want to go back a little bit and say one of your previous presenters, Sam Senchal, was talking about observer theory and the Roolead,
Greenland?
which
Really?
is a kind of formal mathematical object that Stephen Wolfram has named and has kind of defined it as the space of all possible computations. And in that space, there's really no constraint. It's just everything is possible. What that gives you, though, is kind of the place to begin to know that what's possible is this multi-way hypergraph where you could take any infinite number of sequences and potentially merge future uh, at a future point. The reason why I'm bringing that up is
I might take
because
that bet later.
up at this economics level, where human imagination, compute, and energy resources kind of start to unlock this enormous future, it's possible. It's of the possible state space. But we need to know what is actually constraining our options or our sequence of events on that state space. And we can get to a future from many different possible sequences, but not all of them, uh, some of them are cul-de-sac. Some of them are an evolutionary dead end. Some of them burn out before we actually
Yeah,
get
guys.
there.
These are the
And
conversations that
so
crypto is
what we
supposed to
want
be
to
inspiring.
do is open that space of possibility, but then understand really what are the true constraints that we're operating with,
Hmm.
and use
I'm
that
swirling the
as our
Bundaberg.
frame of reference to navigate an extremely complex system. And so really we need fundamental things that help us kind of see the state space, and
Yeah.
that thermodynamic operator or that energy tie is something closer to reality than potentially um, a non-algorithmic rule on the production of money or on the symbolic nature of language, where one culture can't speak to the next, can't speak to the next, but a meta language may arise to help us coordinate.
I think that's really interesting how you frame that. Because it's like we are like physically constrained in many ways, but what you first started off with on this concept of value, like I'm kind of the Vienna school of value. I don't think it's embodied labor. I don't think it's embodied capital. It's subjectively assigned, right? Like what we value is subjectively defined, and this is this like kind of bid price on market goods or commodities or whatever. It's worth what you think it's worth. And so
It's clear,
economics is
CS:GO.
where the psychology of the crowd
How
meets the physics
how
of
many meme coins have you gambled today?
reality, right? And so it's kind of like we can't like talk ourselves into these cul-de-sacs. Like I think a good example of like a sort of an energetic dead end is biofuels, right? I can knock on biofuels. None of my friends work on biofuels, but it's this idea of like growing crops to extract energy from them. And then if you look at like what like probably the best metric for understanding like energy production is return on energy. I take like a barrel of oil equivalent and I get 10 barrels out. And in early days of like oil and gas exploration, like this is kind of 1800s ish, but you'd get like 100 barrels out, right?
Meme
And that's
coins,
gone down
man.
over time to now like tar sands and fracking. It's like, I don't know, 4 barrels out, 5 barrels out, whatever. Um, but to have industrial civilization, we need to have a return on energy value that's, I think, like at least seven, basically, like a 1 to 7 ratio. And then below, you can think in the limit, if it's just one, all of society is trying to harvest and extract energy. Like everybody's just trying to get that. So it's like if we voted ourselves, and this is I think the issue with fiat currency and subsidies and the distortion of true price signals, because we have this complicated situation where prices are both like, we have not really rational actors, right? We have like basically semi-irrational actors that are influenced by sentiment to do things like let's massively subsidize a bunch of like wind farm plants. Like Samsung did this in the North Sea, and I think it's become like it's a money losing operation. Like wind turbines are actually like really bad. Like the blades don't last very long. Tons of embodied energy. There's not a lot of output. And so this is why I think like if we denominated our activities in some kind of unit of account that represents energy production or embodied energy, and you have to run a profitable business to survive, there's actually no way of getting down this blind alley. There's no way of
Thanks
like,
for joining, CS:GO.
the story of like the tropical island where they chop down the last tree to make a canoe or something. Like there's no way of getting into this civilizational dead end if you've actually kind of implemented this the right way. So that's why I'm super keen on this idea. Uh, for the record, I don't have any Quai tokens or coins, and maybe I should. I probably should, but I haven't. So I'm not just like talking my bags here. So I'm curious then. Bitcoin is not really this embodiment of energy. It's sort of a proxy measure, but we want to have currency tied to energy so that it is like aligned with these incentives of the industrial economy. How do you guys actually approach this? Like, how do you actually like kind of get to where we want to be, where we can have like avoiding these like dead ends, I guess, like in a kind of engineering perspective.
Yeah, great question. You brought up biofuels.
Let's do
And
I
this,
and
hate
man.
biofuels.
it's a slight aside, but I just have to speak to it because it's so um, apropos here. Um, I believe that biofuels are done as a geostrategic
All
uh,
right.
industry that
Here's a
links
random
the
number
price of
generator,
oil to food.
CS:GO.
Because if you look at the
Let's do
United States,
evens or
we
odds.
have massive amounts of food
Okay.
production, but we
Send me
historically
your
didn't have
terms.
massive amounts of oil production. And so what ended up happening with biofuels, we were dependent
Send
on
me
sort
your
of the Middle
terms.
East to sell us oil. Now, if we basically said we're not going to give you food if you don't give us oil, that is like one sort of outcome.
I'm not
Or
flipping
if we
50
just make it so
times.
that those prices are locked
You
together
get
through
one
the
one
biofuels
coin flip.
industry, it means that it
You
puts a
choose
ceiling on what
odds.
Saudi
Okay,
Arabia can
what
charge
and if
for a
you
barrel of
win,
oil, because if they charge too much, they won't be able to
if you
afford the
win, you
food.
get 10 kwai.
So it's
What
actually like
happens
a
if
thing
I
that
win?
causes a correlation in the pricing of oil and food. So
Hmm.
I don't know if that's why it was done, but that certainly was the outcome
Let's
of it.
just do 10 kwai,
Um,
evens or
anyway,
odds.
so yeah, sorry, slide aside. But
How
when
about
we're
that?
talking about energy-based money, right? The original one, as you kind of mentioned, was metals,
Odd, you
right?
get
If
10
if you
kwai.
look at
Evens,
history,
I get 10 kwai. How about that?
and it's not just gold; it's just gold happens to be one of the best metals because it doesn't sort of degrade. Metals was actually the first mechanism by which you could sort of keep wealth with time. Prior to
You
that, maybe
get
you had,
10 and I get 5? That's not
blankets
fair.
or, food or housing,
That's
which
not
had a
fair.
relatively
Quai
quick
Nation has already propped you
depreciation
up with
curve just
crap
from
ton of
wear or
tokens, man.
spoilage over time. So the
We gotta at
advent
least
of
make this
metals as
even. If
humans
anything,
was
it should
really
be in my
the
favor.
first mechanism by which we could store value or accumulate wealth over a long term, in an intergenerational sense of it, right? And I think gold obviously is the penultimate manifestation of that. And really, why gold is valuable is because it does a good job of reflecting the energy. The market price tends to follow the production
uh,
price. And then you obviously have these titles
okay.
of
So if it's an I'm gonna click this
durable,
button.
tradable,
Oh, 20 for
fungible,
20?
verifiable, all these things. Now,
Yeah.
some
And
things are harder than
it
others.
Hmm.
doesn't rust. Like
Okay,
silver,
I'll take
gold,
that bet.
platinum don't
20 for
rust. Like
20.
other metals over time might oxidize and
Well, silver
Odd
silver does
number, I
tarnish,
send you
but
20.
but
oh yeah.
platinum and
Even
gold don't,
number,
right?
you tip me 20. You ready?
And so like it makes for
I'm
for
gonna
a good
click it.
money. But the key characteristic when you talk about sound money, my
Tell
definition of
tell
sound
tell
money
me
is
that's a
that the
deal.
mint cost equals the
2020.
sort of market
Even
rate.
or odd.
And when that
Your odds.
and
I'm even.
it's
All
has a
right.
high degree of counterfeit resistance. Those are like the two
That
characteristics
it
of
even
sound
work?
money. So that means if we look at like a
Boom.
dollar is not sound
6.
money
Evens.
because
I win.
a
You owe me
$100
20.
bill costs a penny to produce, right? So its production cost is very far away from its face or its market
Don't worry.
value.
Keep tweeting about Quai. You'll earn it
Now it
back real
has a
quick.
good degree of being resistant to being counterfeited, but those are kind of the sort of the two characteristics that I think define um, sound money. So that's like sort of the basis by which you can then make the leap of saying, okay, um, how about I have a system that doesn't have to have the physicality and some of the disadvantages that come with that physicality, like gold, but carries forth, the property of
That
soundness,
was
meaning
fun,
its
CS:GO.
cost of production sort of matches its face value or its market
Thanks
value,
for joining the chat.
and maybe even improve some properties
Welcome
like
back, Matto. I
verifiability,
swirled my Bundaberg
as
and it
well as
was very tasty,
transferability,
by the way.
etc. So with Bitcoin, right, we have this link
I
of
gotta
hashing, this
multitask over
proof
here,
of
guys,
work
but
concept that
definitely
basically
tune
allows
in to this
math
stream.
to sort of get
If you want better
a
audio
foothold
quality,
in
this
the
is a good one.
thermodynamics of the
This is a good
world,
one.
and we can leverage that to then make that link between thermodynamics and energy and the tokens themselves.
I
And
have a
then we can
question.
actually improve upon some of the characteristics, right? So, one issue with gold is like, why don't we still run on a gold economy if sound money is so great? The reason is that it's hard to divide, it's hard to store, it's hard to transport, right? And the difficulty around those three physical properties of gold is actually what created the opening for gold based notes. And then gold based notes created the opening for fractional reserve banking. And then fractional reserve banking created the opening eventually for fiat. So we need to actually address the shortcomings of gold, transportability, divisibility, verifiability, with a new system that's digital, but then preserve the good characteristics, which are the soundness and the ability to not be able to counterfeit it. And then we can create a money system that hopefully then won't be replaced by notes, out of
No
this,
worries, CS:GO.
convenience around the properties of use, right? Um, so I know I kind of went down a
Well,
winding road there, but
let me ask about some of these ideas because I'm really curious to understand. First off, I'm curious why we actually want like the face value of a currency to equal its mint cost of production. What's the intuition or rationale there? 'Cause very simplistically thinking like, we have like 200 units of value of the economy, and we want to have 200 units of currency to represent that value. But now to produce that currency, I have to destroy all the value, or something like that. Like there's some kind of why do we want this face value to equal its minting cost?
because that's when you have that property, that's when it can't be easily manipulated,
Ah,
right? So that's the property. We think of that as sound money, but really what you're doing is you're trying to make the information about that unit most accurately reflect the reality of the energy and the physics behind it.
mm, mm. And there's something like I don't know, this is Karl Marx talked about this something, but like this
Oh,
different, or maybe it was
interesting.
him and others, but like the difference between like use value and
Yeah.
exchange value, you know, like
So the article
like
that I just
um
pulled up
paper currency has no use value apart from like lighting it on fire
is
and staying warm
Trump's
or
Greenland
something like that.
threats
Um,
reignite the sell
is this
America
kind of
trade.
related? Like, do we want like
So do
is
you
the ideal
think
currency something that actually has
Norway dumped
like like it could be
and perhaps
used in some
Denmark
productive
in
process?
order
Like, and I
to
guess this is like no, okay, we don't want that. So it always
retaliate?
stays currency, or it always stays a
Yeah,
unit.
I mean that's why gold kind of takes the
Interesting
place
times we're
as
living in,
sort of a
guys.
currency because it has no use.
Interesting
I mean,
times.
people say, okay, you can make jewelry, this, that, or the other, but 97% of gold is just a monetary asset.
Right,
Like
right.
we don't consume nearly as much as we produce. We just hold it in vaults and we trade it as a unit or a store value. Like
Hmm.
that's all it's used for. Now, if we look at silver, on the other hand, um, the yearly production of silver is fully consumed, and so when AI starts taking off or solar starts taking off, suddenly the demand for the industrial consumption vastly changes the pricing of the what's supposed to be the money. So then that makes it a bad money system if silver's tripled over the last 12 months, right? So if sort of the value of money tripled, that wouldn't necessarily be a good thing for the economy. And conversely, it's probably going to make a
100%
50%
Matto
retrace,
says.
before it continues on up. But
Yeah,
that volatility also doesn't make for good money. So money itself
Yeah.
should be something that ideally is independent from
interesting
other
times we're
demands
living in,
and
guys.
other productive processes. So you want something that is
One
the
of
ideal form
the
of money
book
can only
I'm
be used as
reading
money and nothing
now,
else.
Hmm.
Ray
And I think you
Dalio's
just described why Bitcoin
Principles
is
for
like a
the
terrible
Changing World
currency because
Order.
its value is extremely variable and tending to go up. Like people are very disincentivized from spending Bitcoin if the value just keeps going up. It has not become a currency. It's become like an
EU beat
asset.
the
It's
US
become like
on
a buy and hold
military,
thing
so
or something.
finance is their
Yeah, so I mean
go-to.
that talks about
Enter the
Gresham's
crypto
law, right?
boom.
Which is basically
Yeah, maybe.
the superior form of money will be hoarded, the
Maybe.
inferior money will circulate. So when we go back to gold and gold
I
notes,
I I truly
everyone
believe
knew that
you
gold
know,
itself was
most of
technically
humanity
superior
doesn't
because it didn't
evolve
have
until they have
counterparty
no other choice.
storage or redemption risk. Now the notes were technically more convenient, right? And then when they became fractionally reserved, people knew that there was material counterparty risk. But
They're kind
if
of
there's material counterparty risk and I have an
talking
ounce
about
of
it right
gold or
now
a one
on
ounce
this
gold
stream.
note, I'm going to give you the 1 ounce gold note and I'm just going to hold on to all the gold I have, because I don't have any counterparty risk on it. So I'm going to end up hoarding that valued asset rather than
Boom.
circulate it in the economy.
You're a man of
And
your word,
Bitcoin
CS:GO.
then suffers from its own success in some way because as the value of Bitcoin goes up, certainly relative to the dollar, people are less and less likely to circulate it. But then the catch 22 for Bitcoin is
All
over
right, man.
time the design of the
Last time.
economics that Satoshi
Last time.
intended was to have
Odds
transaction
you win
fees
still?
replace the inflationary fees. That's why
Odds
the
you win?
inflation goes to zero. But without the scale, only doing 5 transactions per second, there's no way that Bitcoin can generate enough revenue to
Do you
offset
still pick
the
odds?
loss of inflationary subsidy and still have a great enough incentive for the miners to secure the blockchain, right? So in a proof of work only system with
Odds.
only one
Okay.
token that
Here we
wants to
go.
be
I'm gonna
hoarded,
click it,
you
man.
actually
Ready?
end up in
Click.
a very unsustainable system
Oh,
where Bitcoin
you
will never be
win.
able to sustainably pay for its own
You
security.
win.
And if I can't pay for its security, I
All
can't
right,
continue
man.
to function as money because people will be able to double spend it. So there's actually this conundrum with
All right,
just
man.
having a store of value in a system that makes it so, at least in all thought experiments that I've run,
There you go.
impossible to have actually a
There's 20
sustainable
Quai.
economic system.
I'm not playing this game
Mm-hmm.
anymore.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure some people would say there's
Nope,
like,
I'm
I don't
done.
know, I'm no blockchain expert. Like there's like layer 2 or layer 3 technologies that can somehow get around this
I'm done, man.
transaction
That
rate
was
limit
fun
type
though.
thing.
That was fun though.
But
Good
this really
idea.
isn't. I don't actually care about Bitcoin at
Maybe we'll
all.
play
I
again
care about
tomorrow.
energy-based currency. This to me is a philosophically appealing concept, and I am curious, like, okay, so you have a
I
few
know,
ideas up
I
there.
know.
Sound
It's
money,
even.
the mint value should be equal to its face
It's a
value,
tie.
and it
We'll
can't
do
be
we'll do
counterfeited.
overtime
Those are the two
tomorrow.
properties I think you mentioned. And we have this desire to like have this unit of account be represented in some way of energy that's been. Is it now? I think this is where we get into the weeds here. Like,
Somebody needs to build a
is
gambling
it
app
energy that's
for
been produced and
CS:GO.
is stored somewhere, like gold would be in a Fort Knox, or is it energy that's been produced and consumed in some kind of
No,
process?
I'm done,
And then,
man.
and I think
I'm
this.
done. We'll do it again
I mean,
tomorrow.
that's
I
kind of a simple
promise. You come
question, but
back
the
tomorrow.
real
I
issue
will
I would
I will
see is
play another 20
we
Quai.
want our currency to have a constant real purchasing power in time. We actually don't want inflation. We don't want to inflate away wealth. I don't know how we got this idea. We want 2% inflation every year, so people are always getting poorer. I think that's dumb.
It's
We
it's
also,
it's propaganda from the central banks to justify their existence, is where the number
the
comes
more
from.
I've learned about fractional reserve banking and the central banks, the more I'm like, this is such fraud. This is like they're producing no value and they're just printing money into their own pocket. It's anyway, whatever. I don't want to get assassinated, but the point is that we want a real constant real purchasing power in time for a currency, right? We want a dollar to be worth a dollar tomorrow. We don't want that to inflate away. We don't want that to deflate away. Those are bad outcomes. But we also want
Okay,
energy to get cheaper in
come
time.
tomorrow with
So how do
another game.
we
We'll try
kind of
something else
square the
tomorrow.
circle there on like we want energy to be cheaper, we want our face value to equal the minting cost. Is there a contradiction there for an energy-based
Have
currency?
a good night, CS:GO. You rock,
No,
man. Thanks for
I
joining
don't
the
think there
chat.
is, because what ends up happening is you want your purchasing power to be the same. So if the cost of energy goes down, the cost of goods will go down.
Ah.
But the amount you'll be able to buy with a fixed amount of energy is consistent. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that was a very simple answer. That was simpler than I was expecting.
Right.
And actually, like energy growth has been pretty much 2% per year growing, compounding annually.
Well, and if that happens too, you'll actually have a economy that's a little bit smarter, because you'll potentially eliminate the bullwhip effect in supply chains based off like differences in pricing. Sort of everything will instantaneously reprice based off the change in energy prices.
Interesting. Okay.
So right, like let's say I have this spindrift here, right, and
Yeah.
it was $1.
I hope you guys caught that. Energy money incentivizes more resourceful spending and innovation in energy efficiency, achieving uh, greater energy abundance for all, while the value of the energy money may decline, so do the prices of goods and services. Therefore, the amount of value you can purchase remains relatively constant. Key. That's key, guys. When people uh, dig into chi as an energy money, they
Dollar, but
say,
then aluminum, or
won't
let's
innovation in
use an energy
energy
money
like
unit. If it was $1 and aluminum's price doubled, maybe
inflate
I
the
have to pay
value of your
$1.50
energy
for it.
money?
But if it's, one
Yes,
energy
but
token
the
worth
cost of goods and
and the
services
price of
goes
aluminum
down, so it
doubles
doesn't
because
matter.
the cost of energy went up, I should still be able to exchange one energy token for one spindrift.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am also
Yeah,
surprised
I
Andrew
like
Cote
this
doesn't hold any quite.
direction just as a playground. And I've been really interested in getting like better and better large scale frameworks for people, myself specifically, to play in the playground of what is the energy landscape of our modern life, and to see the world, see nature in kind of its natural flows. And yeah, I mean, you can, when you do look at nature, you can see the energy flows at all times if you're looking for it. And what Carl talks about, at least in acknowledging that there's a new way to see something, which is not very easy for us to just immediately embody and start to bring into the kind of conversation, because this is where you get things like let's stop thinking in dollars and let's start thinking in energy units. But up at our cultural level, we're thinking of energy units that have come from a abstract set of work. Like, I sit down in front of a computer and I am pushing bits around that are work that pays something in a dollar unit. I'm not trying to overcomplicate this, but I'm trying to say that there's something really beautiful about trying to think about the world in an energy landscape first, which is what I do think people like, Elon Musk does when he acknowledges that the sun is 99.98% of kind of all the flow in our solar system. And when you think about that, it becomes really obvious that that is the main driver of what things cost in our economy. And then if you just take that point of view and start to really, I don't know, diffuse it into any action, it gets clearer. But it's not easy to talk about with other people because we just don't have the language for saying it yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's when you mentioned this thing about moving bits around in a computer, there's kind of this natural exchange rate between information and entropy, and therefore also energy, right? This is Shannon's theorem, right? So it's like an amount of energy gives you a certain amount of entropy, and that's convertible to energy at a temperature, right? So it's kind of like, and I think about this in terms of like, there's like three products in the universe. There's energy, there's intelligence, and there's like dexterity. It's like moving atoms around, right? You know what I mean? That's it. That's it. And so intelligence, I mean, these are also the only three like factors of production, basically, for any kind of good or service or whatever. And I think now, the metric that we're all optimizing for in the AI game is kind of flops per watt, right? It's how much intelligence can we get per amount of energy? And now there's no real lower bound on that, actually. There's not like there's our human brain runs on. No, there's not, because actually, if you think like physical processes, the Schrodinger wave function evolves unitarily. It's lossless. So information is conserved in time, and so there's no lower bound energy cost for some kind of information bitwise operation if the process is fully reversible, if it's adiabatic. You can beat Landauer's limit. That's the whole point. I had earlier last week a guest on talking about adiabatic reversible computing by using inductive. So most of the parasitics in circuits are capacitance, right? And so by having inductors that match the frequency of operation, you can have energy bouncing between different kinds of storage elements to have a computer that's operating in a lossless fashion. So there's no lower bound energy cost on intelligence, but there is always a lower bound energy cost on moving atoms around, because a Newton meter is always equal to 1 joule. And so think about like, you know, right now energy is like half the cost of aluminum, and the other part are more, depreciation of capital infrastructure and that kind of stuff. But in the kind of limit of like perfect capital goods or perfectly durable capital goods, things that last essentially forever, like a nuclear reactor is like getting close where it lasts like 100 years and it keeps outputting the same amount of power, then energy is really the only cost of production of anything. And so this thing about like you want constant real purchasing power for your energy-based currency. Well, it's not everything has energy as its only cost, but in the future, energy really is the only cost of doing anything. Energy is the only cost of intelligence, and we can get way more energy productive leverage on the production of energy, on the production of intelligence, right? A kind of productive ratio. Um, Dexterity is something else. So I think like this is now kind of gone a little bit off, but I guess I'm making the point that it's like Eric Schmidt had this quote. I love hating on this guy. I don't know why. I think he's probably very smart when pointing this out, but he was like, oh, in 10, 20 years, 99% of all our energy will be spent on computing. I was like, no. I mean, in 1910, people were like, in 10 years, the streets of Manhattan will be 6 feet deep in horse manure. We invented cars. We'll invent reversible computing. I don't think intelligence, like because there's no lower bound on the energy cost of computation. Well, there maybe is, but it's extremely low. But there is on this dexterity element. I think this is like basically in the future, it will make sense to measure the cost of everything in terms of energy. And now I've gone on a long rant, and I'm supposed to be here interviewing you guys. Okay, so I don't know if you want to respond to what I said, or we can get back to this Quai network.
Well, I'll just say, I mean, as an engineer or physicist, saying you can actually get to truly adiabatic conditions, right? That's always a simplifying assumption. You might be able to get close, but you're not going to ever fully get there. So, but I would agree that the limit for intelligence, the sort of evolution of AI over the next 5 years is all going to be about energy and just how to simplify and make more efficient compute relative to the task at hand. So, I think more neuromorphic computing, may make a comeback here, because really it's just driving down towards that limit. So I do think there's a long, long way to go that we can exploit. Uh, but actually achieving adiabatic conditions never seems to happen in reality, right? So
It's a good point. I guess I was trying to say like the lower bit, like we can probably get more energy leverage on intelligence than like shaping metal or something like that.
yeah, no, I think that's fair, right? Because one's a relatively new process, one is a relatively old process. So um, you know, metal and moving the atoms around, we've been optimizing for a few hundred years now, right? Whereas AI stuff, we've been. I mean, it was actually pretty funny with DeepSeek R1. If you actually read that paper, it's interesting to see like how far removed the AI engineers are from the actual like code that runs, because basically all they did is they realized that they're multiplying two arrays together, and with each progressive step of the LLM, they're adding a new row and column, so they don't have to recompute the existing matrix in every step. But that was very much just like if you looked at how it operated and you looked at the math, that would be your first order sort of optimization. But it took R1 to do it, and they had already been spending billions of dollars on inference for multiple years before somebody figured this out and got like a 10x improvement efficiency. So the point being, we're very naive and we're very unmature in terms of how we actually do the compute in terms of its power consumption.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add something too. That's I'm not an engineer or a physicist, and I don't really want to claim that I'm an economist because up till this point, I don't think I've really had the right tools and framework for being a great economist until the proof of work era, in my opinion, um, and really precisely in the proof of entropy minima era of currency production. But like, I don't want to disagree that the possibilities of our technology are limited. So like reversible computing or whatever we're talking about here I do think is available to us in the possible set of future states. But what I'm concerned about is that we acknowledge that that can happen, and then we specifically optimize for one path, the direct route to get there, and we forget that evolution does more of this trial and error, space, explore, exploit, space, state space. And if we too narrow minded tunnel, I don't know, just the end of the day, we're too narrow focused on getting to that one specific end, then we forget to acknowledge that we are still finite, bounded computationally, um, yet that's changing. And what reference units we use to make our decisions in that opportunity landscape needs to be as low error as possible. And in our current regime, the reference rate that we use across 8 billion people on an enormous economic highway has some non-zero error rate baked into every single thing we do. And if if in aggregate, we have quite a large error in the signal that is our economy. And so it could really incentivize the thing that you're saying, Andrew, that's right and accurate, but in too kind of purely that path, or too strongly accelerated in that path, and we don't give ourselves the options of getting there, but in kind of multiple ways, or like with more resilience rather than optimization. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
know where would you land on thinking and kind of resilience rather than optimization?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good point. And I mean, I think this evolutionary mental model gives a lot of conceptual leverage on understanding like this creative destruction process that Joseph Schumpeter wrote about, which is like this periodic upsetting of existing modes of production, or not modes, but business models, methods of producing things, types of consumer markets, that kind of stuff, where it's really, um, and I think this is another thing to think about, is that evolution does not optimize for individual outcomes. It optimizes for population level outcomes, which means that you have some amount of the population that has what look like deleterious genetic adaptations to things. Now, those may be deleterious in normal operating conditions, but when everything suddenly changes, they may actually prove to be resilient. So having this like reservoir of variance in terms of how you approach things, such that we have not hyper optimized for this one narrow thing. This is my own thing too. It's like, I don't think AI is the end of technology. I don't think robotics is the end of, I don't think in 100 years we're going to have like Newtonian propulsion spaceships. I think there's a lot more going on probably. But anyway, so it's kind of like the it is this periodic erosion of supreme returns commanded by one business model. So it's the process, and this is Carlotta Perez writes about this, but it's like this: you have this initial new technology that commands massive premiums in terms of high returns, but new entrants copy that. They compete away those returns to make it a commodity. And from that place, everyone now tries, you kind of have this periodic equilibrium, right? It's like the Cambrian explosion, so it's like, when the dinosaurs died out, you had a new flourishing of all these different kind of, that's something that's a different extinction event, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, so it's like this AI revolution of technology is the fastest to commodity returns in history, right? And it's the fastest adoption cycle. But the commoditization of those returns means that the tunnel vision focus on this particular type of economic activity goes away, and people now have to spread out. You have this vanishing gradient. You actually want a periodically vanishing gradient, so people start to explore a high variance path of outcomes. That's kind of, I mean, I don't know, this is weird evolutionary biology philosophy of industrial capitalism. But I want to
But
get,
Yeah, well, I like that. Maybe I can prompt Dr. K on the next question because you said a reservoir of variance, and I'm looking at this object on screen which has it has a gradient baked into it, and it has this variance, which I would like Dr. K to talk about, which is kind of how to think about proof of entropy minima, because there is this structural algorithmic arbitrage available in proof of work consensus that I think um, Quai is hitting kind of a limit on, and it makes available a new landscape of possibility in proof of work. And I don't know if Dr. K, if we could prompt you into just talking about maybe variance and the, I don't know how to ask the question.
Yeah, no, I can kind of segue here. Maybe the place to start is actually sort of why we're collaborating with Wolfram, right? Why is Stephen Wolfram an advisor of our project? Um, so initially with Quai, we kind of took this approach. It was very much an engineering based approach, which is, how do you scale a blockchain so that you have greater throughput, right? And with greater throughput, you can potentially create sustainable crypto economic systems where you can generate enough revenues from transactions to pay for security over time without having a persistent inflationary subsidy. So, um, that started, very simply, which is saying, let's, use, typical CS type techniques or networking techniques and create shards and subnets. But how do you do that in a consensus-based system? So sort of the initial idea is, okay, we're going to create this hierarchy of merge-mined blockchains, which is going to allow us to have a single consensus mechanism that resolves the ordering of the shards and the subnets. And one description of that system could be a multi-way graph. Another description is a DAG. But what ended up happening is we built this system that could do this sharded topology of hierarchically merged mined blockchains, and would allow us to scale to very very high throughputs so that you
Good
could get
questions in the
Visa
Discord today,
Mastercard like
guys.
performance out of a decentralized blockchain based system. Now, one thing that we ran into though is that the mechanism by which we were coming to consensus was not causally invariant. So we were using kind of a variation on proof of work that we called the hierarchical longest chain rule to try to pick which one of these, green chains is sort of the leader in the system at any given point in time. So sort of how do you resolve who's winning effectively to pick what you think your canonical state is and how to extend it further. Um, and that ultimately led us into sort of an unsolvable loop. Um, and what we ended up coming up with was a variation on proof of work called proof of entropy minima. And what importantly that did to the system is it made it what we would call causally invariant. So basically, we can kind of work through like a simple example here, but if I'm mining Bitcoin, right? There's when a
This is
Bitcoin block
important,
is found
guys.
somewhere in the world,
Listen to this.
it's broadcast through the network. But as it's propagating through space, someone else could sort of mine a competitive Bitcoin block. Now there's two Bitcoin blocks in the network, and the network doesn't know which block to choose. Is it A or is it B? And there's no good way of resolving if it should be A or B using typical proof of work choice rules. So you have to actually wait for the next block to be found on A or B, call it block C, before we know which path we're going to take. So there's this point in time where just based off where the block was produced and when you saw it versus when, say, Steph saw it, you guys are going to be in disagreement about what the state of the system is.
Did you get
So
that?
just based off the order in which you saw the blocks, they arrived at like where at your location. So Andrew's going to think it's A, Steph's going to think it's B, and until we see C, there's no resolution here of what the state of the system is. So with proof of entropy minima, it basically makes a deterministic choice rule that doesn't spoil the um, game theoretic cooperation of proof of work. It's actually better in many ways, but it's done such that each block's weight has sort of a guaranteed uniqueness or goodness, um, to the point of a hash collision. And hash collisions basically will never happen. So there will never be two blocks in the system that are equally good, right? And that's where the causal invariance comes in. So if we did the same, simulation in our head, where two blocks are just naturally produced because of delays in propagation, um, Andrew sees A first, Steph sees B first. Now let's say B has a higher entropy reduction than A. When Andrew sees B, he's going to immediately switch to B. So the second that we all have the same information, we're all making the same choice, which creates this property of causal invariance.
Boom.
And now we have something that's a causally invariant multi-way graph, which is the closest analogy I've ever seen amongst uh, seemingly different systems, but it's very, very close analogy to Stephen Wolfram's, theory of physics. So that's kind of why we started collaborating, because they seem to be convergence, which is in terms of how do you model the world, you're actually asking in some ways, how do I resolve events in space? And if I look at blockchain, I'm actually asking almost exactly the same question, which is how do I order events in space, independent of time? And that's really what Poem gets us.
Yeah, and Andrew, I think I would just say entropy is the arrow of time here in this
Yes.
system, and it's just like it's such a amazing, simple rule, and that's why I've become obsessed with Quai Network because it's very simple, it's elegant, and it really entropy is the leader in this blockchain. So I wanted to prompt that.
So,
I'll give
so
it back to you.
yeah, so there's a couple of sort of like consequences. One is you can actually say that you're never out of consensus, right, in the system, because once we start the blockchain and we have the same rule set, as long as we see the same information, we will always agree. So your only limit in terms of this system to get to the point where we all are saying the same thing is consistency, is just propagation of the information, which you can kind of think of as just, you can go to, your light codes and draw your intersecting boundaries, but we can resolve them causally is the point. Um, and another thing that's kind of interesting
Matt O
in this
says
system,
innovation and
you could think of the
adoption is
hierarchy
the
as
key.
the sort of the top chain, prime being the leader. Prime is actually the follower, and every one of the zones is technically a leader. And as they're sort of progressing and making,
Yeah,
their
I'll
block
just add
choices, whoever has the lowest
no
entropy is
crypto
the aggregate
project
system
has
leader at any given point
achieved
in time.
mass adoption
So I
yet,
can have an infinite number
including
of
Bitcoin.
leaders in the system, which is how we can do the sharding and the subnetting, and then causally resolve how they all work themselves through, because I know that they can never actually have the same value, right? So in the system, I always know that there's
Great
exactly one
questions
leader. I don't
happening
know
in
who it
Discord right
is,
now,
but
guys.
the system will resolve to who the leader is based restricted only on the speed of the propagation of the data.
So what they just covered on this stream here is really how Quai Network achieves scalability and causal invariance, or a truly deterministic system in an asynchronous, decentralized way. Um, and as Steph likes to say, entropy is the arrow of time. The other key highlight there is um, everybody will make the same decision given the same information, right? And so because we've been able to achieve this with proof of entropy minima, we can do everything that blockchains claim to want to do, and we can do it at scale.
This is insanely cool. I just gotta pause in for a second, because we started with this like talking about like money and incentives and fiat currency, and then it turns out to actually implement this energy-based currency, you get into this like computational view of physics, this causally invariant multi-observer graph construction of things, where like physics, I mean, just a few things you said are just like that's physical reality. It's like all observers should agree on the same observations, like so long as they have mutual information, right? Like we are causally connected, we exist in the same light cone, like you see the ball's red, I should see the ball, whatever, this kind of stuff. Um, I'm curious. Okay, so this has like some badass mathematical foundations. In practice, I'm trying to think now. In practice, um, what is kind of going on? So we have this. Okay, so we have this like mathematical framework to avoid this sort of production of orphan branches where we don't really know like what branch to follow. So we're going to follow this like minimum entropy branch always as the forking rule or decision rule. Um, Now, pragmatically speaking, like if we wanted to use this as a currency, like like can it sustain the volume of economic activity, or do Quai coins that get mined, do they represent each of them like a jewel or something? Like kind of what's the connection now back to this? Like we need energy and we need to like run our economy. And it's cool if our economy works in the same sort of multi-graph causal invariant theories of reality.
Yeah, well, so it's very interesting. Everything seems to like converge at some level for some reason. I guess just because if you're trying to get to like a true basic description of reality, um, everything looks self-similar in some ways. Um, so in this system, what we're doing is, from a very practical standpoint, you have to say if we are going to replace the current money system, what are just the
All right,
functional engineering
guys. I need your
requirements, right?
y'all's feedback here.
And say
You want to see how
five
pathetic
second
I
sort of
am?
confirmations, throughput on the order of 50 to 100,000 transactions per second,
We
fees that are
have
somewhere
accrued
around maybe a penny or less. Those are just sort of
by
practical engineering
scanning the
requirements to
QR
create a
codes
system
on the
where
back of our Zen
a person would
freaking
want to
packs
use
here.
it more than the
Over
existing one,
2,500
right?
points.
So
Boom.
from that is like what gives rise to this structure and this hierarchy in Poem, which is we need to
Should I
design
spend them?
this proof of work based system that can
Should I
meet all of those
spend my
requirements.
Zen
So
points?
sub penny fees, 50 to 100,000 transactions per second, 5 second or less
I can get
confirmations,
an
right? And
Osprey
so that
Arcane
is
hit
like where
bag.
that design comes from. Now, in the system, in terms of the tokens, there's two
I can
different
get a
tokens.
T-shirt.
And we don't think that you can make a system with
Can
just
get a
one token.
Roku
You kind
streaming
of have to have
stick.
two. And the reason is you need a store value, you need a unit of account, and you need a medium of exchange. And there isn't
Looks like I need to
a
save some more
system, at
points
least that I could dream up, where one token could serve
if I
all
want
of those
anything
purposes.
cool.
So in the
Can
system,
get a
we have
Bog
Quai,
bag.
which is a more sort of traditional deflationary token type system like a Bitcoin.
Ooh, getting
It's
close
EVM
to being able to
compatible, it's
purchase a drone.
programmable, it's account based.
I already have a
Now, in the
Zen
same
metal can,
chain system, we have a separate state root
so we've
that
been
we
here
have a second
before.
token on called Chi. Chi is the one that's linked to a certain number of hashes. So basically, you produce 10 e to the 18 hashes, like you get a Chi. Um, and that basically links the value of Chi
It's a
back to
want or
the
a
production
need.
cost, which is predominantly energy derived. And then Chi also has this nice property
Are
of
you referring to
cash
my
out privacy.
upcoming Zen
So
purchase here, or are you
that's
talking
really
about
meant to be
crypto
the unit of
still?
account as well as the medium of exchange in the system where
we're,
Quai
we're,
is
we're
the
getting
stored
derailed.
value.
Hmm.
But we're using proof of work to not only scale the system. So if you
Oh
kind
man,
of
I
start to
definitely
think
don't
about
need any of these
that
things.
property of
That's
causal
for sure.
invariance, I haven't constructed another way of creating causal invariance in a
What the
distributed
heck is
setting that
Can
isn't proof
Jam?
of work. So even if we said like let's do proof of stake would actually devolve into mining.
A home theater projector? That's pretty cool.
If you were trying to get the causally invariant property. So basically, there's something about causal invariance and
Yeah,
proof
I
of
definitely
work that
don't
are
need any of these
inextricably linked,
things.
it seems.
Hmm.
Uh, but that also then gives us that nice little foothold into creating a
Yeah,
token which is related
we're
to
gonna
the
keep saving.
energy or the thermodynamics of the physical world, which then
We're gonna
allows
keep
us to
saving our
ideally
Zen
create
points.
a unit of account or a money system that has a very low information loss in its use, right? Both in its production as well as its transmission. And that is really the goal, right? So, in very roundabout ways, we were basically saying the money today sucks because it doesn't have high fidelity of representing real information. It's manipulated politically, it's manipulated by the banks, it's manipulated in many different ways so that it has its high loss in the system, both in terms of the information that it's really representing as well as the cost of it running through the system. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to have a very high fidelity signal on what it represents relative to the real world and minimize the friction of it flowing in the system.
This is amazing. There's a lot going on here. So just to kind of reframe in my own understanding. So miners on this network, they are producing both this Quai, which is this longer term deflationary kind of store of value, something more analogous to Bitcoin, but they're also producing chi at the same time. And that is like this expendable cash that is maybe has more anonymity or something associated with it. Where it's like paper money. It's like you can spend it. There's no traceability, I guess, necessarily.
No more than if you had cash.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. Um, are you saying now ultimately tying this to energy comes through the mining cost and like the hash rate? Like that's really what ties us to energy. But now is that because we started off talking about Bitcoin and how it's sort of a proxy energy currency, but is there something about how
Right.
the
Energy.
block size or the hash rate or something is keeps
This
this
stream right
more
here is
pegged such that the value of
approaching
Quai or Chi
1,700
or
views.
either one is more attached to the price of the energy it took to produce them?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's like three layers to the answer, but the very first one is that a chi is
Guys, if you're
issued
interested in the
relative to a certain number of
transparency of
hashes,
SOAP, the
right?
conversation happening
So
in
we don't
general right
have sort of
now
this
in our Discord
artificial
server is
monetary
a
policy. The monetary policy of chi
really
is
good
to
one.
produce chi in a way that it should always represent roughly the same amount of energy over
Mm.
time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Chi isn't meant to go up in value. It's not meant to go down in value. It's really just meant to be a proxy for energy. Like that is the monetary design of the system. The other thing, and this maybe harkens back to some arguments that Keynesians would make for central banking, which is although gold, has this property where the production cost wants to converge to the mint, it has a very inelastic supply. And so one of the arguments that they made was because of that inelasticity in supply, it creates booms and busts in the economy. So therefore, we need a central bank and we need, a non-gold based asset so that we can adjust elasticity. The cool part about this system is the supply of chi is much more elastic than something like gold. So there's actually two ways to produce chi. One is to mine it, and you know miners are basically given the option when they're mining. They can produce Quai or they can produce Chi. Like so, for any given block, they get to choose. Now, why would they choose Chi? The reason they would choose Chi is because the market price is above their production cost, which means they're going to increase the supply, sell for profit at market, and they're going to keep doing that until the market price converges to their production cost, right? At which point they may not mine any more Chi because we don't need any more Chi right now. But then the other mechanism in the system is you can mint chi by burning Quai, or you can mint Quai by burning chi. And there's a protocol offered rate, but basically the previous sort of choices about both mining as well as conversion cause the system to adjust that protocol offered rate until the market becomes neutral to the offered. So that's really just a fancy way of saying that we're using an internal market to self-oracleize the external relative pricing in a decentralized way. So basically at the prevalent market rate, you can move Quai and Chi across. And when you do that, you can much more elastically increase or decrease the supply of Chi, which should cause a much faster convergence of the market price of Chi to its production cost. So it not only then is like an energy-based unit, but it's an energy-based unit that has a highly elastic supply.
Okay, this is interesting. This is kind of, I mean, it's kind of like this gold-backed dollar almost. It's like it's Quai-backed chi currency in some sense. Like
But
there's some kind of
the problem with the gold-backed dollar, though, is you're still trusting somebody. Like
Yeah,
that's
right.
fundamentally the problem, right? If I have a gold backed dollar, we're actually just winding the clock back like 100 years. Um, and then the person that's the custodian is going to realize the people that have the gold notes don't always come back all at once to redeem, so they can print a few extra, and no one's
Matt
going to
O
be the
says,
wiser.
I read a
I
while
know,
ago that
totally.
the
Yeah,
US
yeah,
was
yeah.
going to
I think that
reevaluate the
there's
gold
Fort
in
Knox
Fort
doesn't even
Knox,
have gold
basically
anymore.
saying
It's
it's
filled with like
overvalued. Price
Labubus and
dumps, a
Dubai
bit
chocolate or
crazy
something.
statement, I know.
Right?
Too many
Yeah,
coffees
yeah,
this
yeah.
morning. Nah,
Okay, this is
man.
cool. Now, I
Elon
know
Musk was actually
there's been
calling
some
out Fort
development
Knox a
recently
while ago.
with
I
this
think
SOAP
he was
protocol or
definitely
something like
going to
that.
look into it
So I
before
kind of
he
have like a
left the
mental picture now of
administration.
like, so there's a kind of constant
But yeah, that
exchange
was a
rate between
conversation at one
hashes
point.
and chi,
Definitely got
and
swept under the
there's
rug.
mechanisms to keep that like converging to the market price. Like basically, it's profit incentive to mine more and then sell
It
it
would
right
have been
away.
more
And then you have
important
another kind of feedback loop between
pre
Quai and Chi
removing the
that gives like
gold
another, I guess,
backing
degree of
from the
freedom to
dollar.
ensure this sort of
Elasticity of supply. Yeah.
Today
yeah,
it's more of
totally.
a
This like
trader's game.
this elasticity of supply. Now, what is this SOAP thing that is? I think it's been a more recent development in blockchain world that I would love for you to explain.
Yeah. Here, let me bump over this screen that I'm sharing. We have a cool dashboard. But
Sweet.
the interesting thing about SOAP is here we can look at that. But the interesting thing about SOAP is um, what is SOAP first off? It's the Subsidy Open Market Acquisition Protocol. Um, so the basis of SOAP is something called merge mining. So when you're basically mining a block, you can potentially mine another block. So this idea goes back almost 13 years to Bitcoin and Namecoin. Namecoin, Namecoin was sort of the first project to implement merge mining. But basically, they would have a commitment in a Bitcoin header. Bitcoin doesn't like know anything about the Namecoin commitment, but that data that Namecoin inserts into the Bitcoin header allows them to use the Bitcoin header as effectively their header when that Bitcoin header gets worked, right? So it's kind of a way to reuse instantaneously proof of work, if that makes
No
sense.
such thing as
So
too
you're
much
sort of creating
coffee.
co-commitments. So we actually use this quite a bit within Quai already because that
Never.
hierarchy of merge by chains is just co-committing to three
You just
different
need to
chains at
drink more
once.
water.
And then depending on the difficulty you achieve, you'll either get a zone block, a zone region block, or a zone region and prime block, right? So we use it very heavily in the system already. But what SOAP does is it takes it one level further and it says we can actually put our chain into Bitcoin Cash or Dogecoin or Litecoin, etc. So we're actually mining Quai, but then we're also simultaneously mining these other chains. Now, the reason for it is when you have a proof of work consensus system initially, it's very expensive because the miners are getting paid to mine, and a lot of that money then has to go to market and they have to sell it to cover their mining costs. So unless you have new entrants into the system buying in greater quantity than the miners are selling, you have very negative like price dynamics, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what Stroke does is it says we believe that the hash rate of Bitcoin and Dogecoin and Litecoin, et cetera, are all underutilized hash. So what we can do is we can use our blockchain and basically co-commit to their blockchain. So we functionally become a mining pool in their blockchain. But the revenue we get from their chain can then go to supporting our chain. So instead of allowing the miners to merge mine two tokens, we just give them Quai, and then the second token, your Dogecoin, Litecoin, et cetera, gets sold at market, and then is used to buy and burn Quai. So basically, it removes the cost of securing our system and puts that burden onto these other systems, which we believe are not fully utilizing their hash rate, so to speak. But what
What
that
is that?
means is instead of having sell pressure every day, worst case, you're neutral. So the amount of Quai you emit should be roughly equal to the amount of revenue you're bringing in from merge mining these other chains. And then in a price rising environment, you're actually going to be making more money than you're giving out every day. So you actually get this positive sort of deflationary loop where hash rate gets subsidy tokens buys and burns Quai, which increases the price, which leads to more hash rate, which leads to more subsidy. So you get it's basically taking a feedback system that had a negative coefficient and making it a positive coefficient. So now
Hmm.
your feedback's positive, so the system wants to tend to grow rather than shrink.
Okay, this is very interesting. What do you mean by underutilized hash rate? Like, what does that mean?
So the physics of coming to consensus are constrained by like wires, bandwidth, ping times, compute,
Hmm.
etc. Um, and what we've done with Quai is said, what is the maximal like rate at which we can operate within those constraints to get to consensus so that we can maximize the utility for the user, right? And anything that's below that physical constraint is underutilized, right? So we know that we can kind of get consensus in 5 seconds. We know that we can do, say, 800 TPS per shard. We know that we can have many shards, right? Um, Bitcoin, on the other hand, has one block every 10 minutes, and they can do 5 TPS over that 10-minute period. So
Okay.
they have a ton of hash rate, but what they're doing with that hash rate is a lot less than they could be doing with that hash rate, given the aggregate
Hmm.
constraints developed by the internet systems, right?
Hmm.
So basically, because we're so much faster than them, we can actually function as their pool. So
Mm.
Pi Network is effectively like a mining pool from Bitcoin's perspective,
Interesting. Okay, so kind of
right?
like,
But because
yeah.
we can function as a mining pool, we can use that co-commitment to create value for ourselves.
Hmm. 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 Okay, so underutilized hash rate really means the amount of compute going into this system versus the discrete steps at which that tree is evolving. You could fit tons of more of your protocol within that, like within that time span, within that block rate or whatever. And what you end up doing is people that, I guess, pragmatically speaking, they would subscribe to this protocol on your platform in some way, they will be part of a mining pool that gets that side token, whether it's Dogecoin or something else, whatever that has a lower hash rate than you guys. When they produce that, it's automatically sold at market, and that is then used. That cash output is used to purchase Quai or Chi or whatever, burn it, take it off the market, and that miner is now rewarded with your
They're
own
still
currency.
rewarded with Quai. It's just
Yeah.
why we give them Quai, we're also buying the same amount of Quai out of market and burning it. So then the
Mhm.
net like emissions of Quai should be zero on any given day.
And that actually increases the value of the thing they're mining by increasing the demand for it.
Correct. So
That's cool.
so the real like implication here is that previously, the
Almost
sort
at
of
1900
operational
views on the
cost of
stream,
these
guys.
systems was born on the system itself. So
Hmm.
it was
Not
very
my
hard for
stream.
new entrants to come in
Andrew
because they didn't
Cotes.
have as much hash rate and didn't have as much capital. But now with SOAP, what you're saying is any inefficient system or capital that exists is actually the bootstrap for any new network that can come in and increase the aggregate utility of the system.
Interesting. Does this, I'm curious if this would lead to like increased like price correlations across otherwise unrelated tokens, and you'd get like an increase in market volatility this way. Because like
Um,
now, I mean, this probably happens anyway, just because it's a general sentiment thing. But now, suppose like there's lots of this like this
Oh
SOAP
yeah.
protocol going on, and then for some reason Dogecoin price crashes, and so the burn rate, like on the
There we
Quai that
go.
is purchased and burned using whatever revenue was from that drops as well. So the additional induced
Nice.
demand for Quai also drops.
yeah, so the system is designed to want to
Yeah.
tend towards
This
equilibrium.
this
So
package right
in
here.
step
Oh
change
dang, I can't
shocks,
zoom in.
you won't necessarily have
Whoops. Whoops.
um, perfectly equivalent flows, but over time,
This
right,
one
they do
right
want to
here.
converge, right? So if there's a
That's what
shock
I
to
have access
Dogecoin
to
or there's a shock to Quai, vice versa,
in my
you're still going
supermarket.
to see the
I
amount
want
of
this
hash
one
rate
though. I want
want
this
to
freaking 10
converge to
pack.
be like the same value,
I can put
which
that in
then
my
means the flow
fridge.
is still neutral. Now, yes, in any you know
Heck yeah, that looks tasty.
dynamic setting, you're never in equilibrium,
That
but
looks
you're always
tasty.
tending towards equilibrium. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
so I don't think that you'd see an increase in volatility against the relative assets. What you're ultimately going for in some ways is um, the game that we're trying to play is to get all the hash rate in the world. Like whatever hash rate exists, we want it on Quai, right?
Hmm.
Because the majority of the hash rate is grossly inefficient, and we think we can add a significantly greater utility than what they're doing. Um, there's also a step here where um, we believe we can design a trustless system that will allow the tokens to flow cross chain, meaning you could take your Bitcoin, wrap it into Quai. That Bitcoin will then have all of the characteristics of Quai network. So, if we are successful, not only should we grow to Bitcoin's hash rate, but Bitcoin may only exist as an asset which circulates on the Quai network.
Hmm. It's kind of like I just keep converting to like a currency analogy, which is like kind of this like the international dollar or whatever, right? It's kind of like it's if you have like the biggest well, in this sense it's like if you have the algorithmically best performant network, then you become the default unit of exchange even when transacting normally in other things because you
Yep.
can represent them reliably as denominated in Quai or Chi or something.
Yeah, it's kind of like the dollar, right?
Yeah. But not central bank controlled.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So that's the other one, which is as like the Qi market matures, we'd like to be able to export Qi. And the whole reason that the US like has this sort of position of power and wealth is because it's been exporting the dollar. That's been our greatest export since Bretton Woods,
Yeah.
right? That's what creates the hegemonic power and quality of life that we get in the United States. But we believe that the convergence of stable like tokens only can happen in a work-based setting where the token is related to energy. You're actually seeing with stable coins a divergence, right? You're not getting everyone going to one token. You're actually getting an explosion of different tokens and everyone trying to compete, which is going to lead to a fracturing of liquidity and actually a worse user experience as you try to navigate the 50 different,
Hmm.
US denominated tokens that exist. But the interesting thing with proof of work, as well as energy-based tokens, is the market would want to equilibrate to just one or two systems, not many systems. So the dynamic is actually consolidating, not diversifying. So we kind of see this as very positive in many ways, both in terms of obviously scaling the system, but there's only so many replications of proof of work systems that can exist. You can't have like infinite replicates, and the market want infinite replicates. But with stable tokens on proof of stake or proof of authority systems, you could literally have an infinite number of replicates, and the system wouldn't know how to discriminate or consolidate amongst them.
Hmm. I'm curious then from you guys, like what is the competition then here? Like, are other people pursuing other energy-based proof of work systems? Is there, like, I'm curious, like, what is if there's a convergence on this as like the optimal competitive form?
To be clear, Elon Musk is a Quai Nation member and he keeps promoting energy money. So this will be a narrative in 2026. Wink, wink, nod, nod.
Is there still ways of competing, or is it kind of just whoever has the biggest like hash rate lead start, I guess, wins?
Well, no, so what we're saying with SOAP is that the lead becomes less important
Okay.
because if you incorporate SOAP into the system, if you can tell a better story and ultimately add greater utility, you can supplant the incumbent, right?
Hmm.
So only to the point that there's no more efficiency in the consensus space using proof of work does it become anti-competitive. Now, I would say though, the um, point at which we have developed Quai is such that we have heuristically approached optimality of what can be done in the consensus space using proof of work.
Did you guys catch that? So SOAP works for Quai Network because we have quote unquote heuristically achieved optimality within the environment that it operates, and it will continue to scale as the environment improves, right? So as we, increase the bandwidth and decrease the latency of the internet, Quai network will continue to scale. So any other chain that wants to compete with a protocol such as SOAP will have to achieve the same. So now all blockchains are competing on utility.
Work. So, um, if there is going to be a competitor, they would have to start soon.
Right. Yeah.
If that makes sense, because
Yeah.
once the network effect does start to take place, and then what ends up happening is, um, unless you can sort of exploit like a significantly higher degree of utility, you're not going to be able to overcome the network effect. So I
Hmm.
guess my statement or my hope would be that with Quai, we've gotten close enough to the efficient frontier that there isn't room for new entrants.
Hmm. Hmm.
But if we're wrong, there will be a new entrant and they'll get closer to the efficient frontier.
Yeah. Right. 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 So it's really now. I mean, that's kind of awesome because it's basically saying it's like it is now just a competition of algorithms, and they're competing on utility and metrics of what we think of as sound currency in this sense. And it's sort of like, I mean, I think this is why it's so cool. It's like the incentives will now optimize for that outcome, regardless of some like political outside influencer actor. And I guess if you get sufficient volume such that there's no one actor who can actually like tip the scales just through their transactions or price action, or whatever, then it truly is decentralized. It's really like I'm sure even now, like if someone had Satoshi's wallet and they started selling everything, it would cause a massive influence. Like the whale influence on prices is still significant. But I guess with this, it's like sort of you can get to the point where no one actor is big enough to actually distort the price signals represented by what is happening here.
Well, this that's also one more of the subtle like aspects of SOAP, which is, um, this provides a much more aggressive diffusion mechanism than native proof of work. So if you do proof of work without SOAP, basically you're using distribution, and part of that distribution is forcing coins to change hands between miners and buyers. But the level that you can sustain relative to your total supply is somewhat low because you're also then paying for that security directly every day, right? So, um, that means that it's a distribution mechanism and it's a diffusion mechanism. What
Mm-hmm.
you're saying with Quai right now with SOAP on it, you don't need proof of work to be the distribution mechanism. It can be the diffusion mechanism. But since we've decoupled it from having to pay it out directly, we're using the subsidies to subsidize it. We can actually have, orders of magnitude more diffusion than you can have in a regular system. So if you have this more diffusive characteristic as the system is growing, you're going to arrive at a much better Gini coefficient than you could in any other proof of work mine system.
Well, Gini coefficient in proof of work mining system, is Gini coefficient what I normally think of as this like all the money owned by one person is a coefficient of one?
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
So like
Okay.
if we look at Bitcoin, I think the top 10,000 addresses like hold half the Bitcoin or something.
Ah, right.
So it
Right.
has a relatively poor Gini coefficient. And if you look
Mhm.
at proof of work systems, they tend to follow the same curve, but it has to do with the characteristic that they are using mining simultaneously as distribution as well as diffusion. But with SOAP, you can do it just diffusively, which allows us to have a lot more relative to total supply.
So help me understand this, just because I'm not like a super crypto guy. Are you saying this distribution? Sorry, this difference between distribution and diffusion is a difference between like mining additional blocks as well as like the actual transactions that can spread these between actors?
Yeah, let me give like an analogy. Let's say I have a beaker of clear water, um, and I have dye. I have blue dyed water, right? And so I'm pouring my blue dye water into my beaker. That is proof of work mining. So what ends up happening is you have the beaker, you start at a level, you start adding blue water, right? It's eventually going to diffuse and it's going to look homogeneous, but you're also increasing the level simultaneously,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. what I'm doing with soap is I have a stir bar and I don't actually have to like add new water to the system. I'm adding like drops of dye and the stir bar is mixing it up.
Hmm.
Right.
And
So we
so,
end up in this similar state where we have a homogeneous system. It's just when we do the homogeneous system with the stir bar, we get a lot more agitation. So it gets there much more quickly and it's better diffused. Right.
and in this sense, this adding the water thing, are you saying basically, when you look at all these coins that have been produced in Mind, not all of them represent the same amount of
Man,
computational
even
work?
Monero's going down.
When I'm talking about adding, I'm really just talking about the fact that you have to increase the supply to get the mixing done.
And
In
what does the mixing correspond to, I guess, in a sense?
who has the money,
Ah,
right? So it's the Gini coefficient. So like how well distributed is
oh,
the money? So the more mixing I have, the better the distribution is.
and that's
So
because okay.
so soap lets us like turn the stir bar on, so we can get agitation, we can get mixing of the system without having to increase the total volume.
Just because the transactions themselves are what's recorded in the ledger.
Well, and we're forcing transactions to take place because we're still minting Quai, and then we're getting this other subsidy thing. Then we're selling that, and then we're going to market to buy back the Quai. So you're forcing that volume of flow through Quai every day, which
I
is
get
going to
it.
increase the diversity of the set.
I get it. Okay, interesting. So you can support lots of new transactions without necessarily increasing the net total supply in currency because you're using these sidechain coins to burn in real time as it's mined.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So then you'll get a much better aggregate distribution of the system rather than being like hyper concentrated amongst a few early participants.
Interesting. Okay, this is very cool. There's a lot of like algorithmic complexity going on here. I'm curious, like, what was your background coming into this? Because it sounds like you have this mix of economics, physics, mathematics.
Yeah, so I got a mechanical engineering degree undergrad, and then I got a doctorate in material science.
Oh no
I
way.
started in my Bitcoin journey in 2012. And it was very much just from a libertarian standpoint, but I hadn't really had formal economic training prior to that. But that certainly got me started on a multi-year journey of learning about money and economics. And then
Hmm.
once we had Quai formulated in terms of how to scale, right, we did 2 to 3 years of thinking on how to do the economics correctly. And one of my core engineers too is actually an economist. So he has a master in economics. So between my research and him, we kind of figured these things out. I will say one of the things that's very frustrating with economics as it exists is it's not a real science, right? It's propaganda, and so you kind of have to like foliate what is like something you can hold on to as being real and what is just a mirage. So that was actually probably the most frustrating part about the journey was figuring out like is there anything real behind this quote unquote economic science, and if so, what
Over
parts,
2,000
right?
views on this stream,
Um,
guys.
so there was a lot of reading. I would say most of
Bullish.
the stuff that we found useful probably happened prior to the 20th century than in the 20th century.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, and then there's been a couple inspiration branches. I know um, Steph referred to them earlier, but there's this field of like crypto economics. So like a couple times since the 70s, a physicist or like a mathematician has been like, I want to dip my toe into economics, and then they start developing a concept based off thermodynamics. So there's a few reference points there as well. It's never been fully developed, never been accepted by the quote unquote economic community, but um, yeah, we just kind of had to build it from the ground up, I guess.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Well, there's always been this tr- uh, transfer of physicists into economics, and I think there was this big thing that happened at the end of the Cold War. It's kind of a historical anecdote, but like end of the Cold War, a bunch of physicists ended up going to Wall Street and developing a lot of these like modern high frequency trading models and that kind of stuff, just because they were like physics is the best sort of like competitive mathematics, sort of creative mathematical system modeling kind of mindset. Um, so I just remember this from forums back in the day, but like there's some correspondences between like I don't know neutron star implosions and stuff like that, and like kind of esoteric financial modeling. I mean, the Black-Scholes equation is one such thing, which is like the perfect options pricing model based on this kind of
Yeah.
turbulent flow type thing.
Yeah, I think the reason physicists are good at it is just because they're trying to look at the behavior of a system and model it, right?
Totally.
And the system can be completely arbitrary, but like once you have that skill set,
Yeah.
you can begin to apply it really anywhere that you can measure something, right?
Well, that is, I mean, that is this interesting thing in economics is this concept of performativity, where the model becomes true because people believe it is true, you know? And so now it's like whether the Black-Scholes equation for options pricing is the perfect risk-free whatever, so long as everyone thinks that's true, the price action will eliminate any deviations from that model for what the price should be of this asset. So I think that's probably where you think it's like the risk of this propaganda. Like if everyone just believes Beanie Babies are this amazing store of value, but the reality can only like the
What
psychology
up, Meme
can become
Bus?
detached from physical reality
Welcome
for
to the
only so long,
chat.
and then there'll be this very rude awakening where it's
Well,
sort of
so the
We're just
interesting thing
getting
about it
caught
though
up on
is
some
the concept of an energy dollar does not
deep
eliminate
concepts about energy money
subjective price premiums. All it
with
basically is
Andrew
saying
Cote
is that
and
competitive
Dr. K from
commodity
Quai Network
goods
over here. Welcome to the
should
chat.
approach the price of production,
Everybody who joins
and
the
in doing
chat
so, they
earns some
will
Quai.
be
Glad to
roughly
have you. Glad
well
to have you.
represented by
Make sure you're
this
signed
energy
up
token chi
for
at any given
Kipper
point in
Money.
time,
mm-hmm.
right? So that leaves
That's how we send
vast
Quai
amounts of
around here.
space for
So
non-competitive goods
there
and
you go.
your expression of
Just
subjective
sent
price
you some
preferencing.
Quai. Oh, looks like you already
But the
got Kipper
important
Money. Good
part
work.
is that it doesn't pollute the money itself.
Good work. Welcome to the
Totally.
So
chat.
just because you think a Beanie Baby is like worth a lot doesn't have any impact on my ability to buy my Spindrift, right?
Yes.
Because the money is independent of your Beanie Baby.
And I think more to the point, it eliminates the opportunity for some kind of centralized actor to basically like do things that benefit themselves at the expense of everyone else, right? That, like you said, pollute the money supply or destroy the price signal or just
Well,
basically.
so take an example of Beanie Babies, the housing crisis in 2008. That was a Beanie Baby situation, right? We were vastly overbuilding and overpricing homes and allowing people to take debts that had no, you know, um, purpose or ability to have those debts because the risk was not measured correctly. That's a tragedy of a debt-based money system, right? Versus an asset-based money system. So your speculation on Beanie Babies or the housing price materially impacted my purchasing power because of how it had to resolve through preventing the systematic unwinding of those debts, causing a massive collapse by injecting massive amounts of newly printed money, right? But if we live in a world where the base unit isn't a debt but an asset, that's much, much harder to do because as long as I sit in the asset, I'm never exposed to the debt.
Oh wow, that's a deep insight. I mean, what you're getting really at is that this fractional reserve banking is based on debt. It is based on IOUs, and it's if everyone wants to clear their debts at once, it's impossible, and that is the liquidity crunch, and that was like the same with the Silicon Valley, so like SVB banking crisis a few years ago as well, which was like they were exposed to treasury risk, and so I think treasury rates went up too fast or
Yep.
something, and then
And then they were underwater.
they were
Yep.
underwater on this, so basically this debt-based fractional reserve banking system, you cannot clear all IOUs at once. But if it's asset-based, is it guaranteed that can happen, or is it just less likely? Because I
So,
guess
so what would happen is some people will decide that they want to have debts because there's like a reason to have debts in the economy, but it isn't the baseline and it isn't um, like done for you. So to sort of pull this thread a little bit more, if you're sitting in a field with $100 bill and you're like, I got my $100 bill here, no one can influence my $100 bill. That's not true because that $100 bill is a socialized representation of all of the bank's debts, the private bank's debts. So like the underwriting at JP Morgan for their home loans goes into the value of that dollar that you're holding physically because they're the ones that are able to increase and decrease the supply, right? We say it's the central bank, which also is a consortium of the private banks, just so we're clear. But in reality, the 95% of the money isn't issued by the Fed, it's issued by the banks,
Right, right.
right? Through creating new debts.
Meme
So
bus.
Mhm,
You're living
mhm.
up to your name.
it's so
It
pernicious in the
is
system, there's
quite
no way to have a dollar that isn't a debt.
interesting.
All dollars are debts, right? But let's say I have chi.
Yeah, these are the conversations I live for, guys. Bitcoin really started the conversation with, the whole concept that fiat money is absolutely terrible and not healthy for any global economy, spurred by the reintroduction, if you will, of fractional reserve banking. So Bitcoin started the conversation on how we fix the money and fix the world. Andrew Cote is continuing the conversation with Quai Network in terms of a better economy baked in thermodynamics or thermoeconomics. So proud to be here and being able to at least tune in to a conversation that should be evolving. Unfortunately, no other blockchain is actually pushing it forward. But here we are at Quai Network.
Right now it's like I have an ounce of gold or I have a note for an ounce of gold. Now I know the difference. So if I have chi and I'm just like, I have chi, I'm not in this, debt based note market. I know I'm not in this debt based note market. That's not the default entry point for using the money. You can be in the asset based money. And if you want to get yield, you can decide to get yield by creating a loan and then creating some derivative representation or promissory note against that loan, but it will clearly be different than the asset,
Right, right.
which means you're going to be much more diligent about who you're loaning, what you're, how much you're loaning, and what your risk payback needs to be directly to the asset holder, rather than having this confused socialized system where the government is sort of this like originator of all debts through the government bonds, the Fed's the originator of all the money, and then the banks just always are the ones taking the skim in between of the interest, right? When I put $100 in the bank, they'll give me maybe like 30 bips and they'll be making like 5.5 points, right? It's because we live in this weird conglomeration of debt based money and there's no hard asset. But if we started to say, let's reimagine the system as if everything was gold, tokens, and like I knew I had a token or I had a promise to a token, I would know the difference between those two things.
Hmm. Yeah, this is disconcerting, realizing that there's no floor. It's just debt all the way down, and it's like completely illusory. I'm
Well,
curious though.
well, you know what happened with SVB. Most people don't know this. So what the banks did to prevent, or the government did, the Fed did, to prevent the systemic collapse of the regional banks, because you had Silvergate, then you had SVB, and then there were like a couple that were coming after it. To stop that, you know what they did? They allowed all of the banks to deposit their bonds with the Fed and get full face instantaneously. So you basically went from like a 10% reserve situation to a 0% reserve situation. So since that point in time in 23, we've effectively lived in a 0% reserve fractional banking system.
Oh wow, that seems like really bad.
Yeah, that's where we are though. Since SVB went under, there's no reserve requirement, because I can literally take my bond, which has yield, has interest, has like a current base and par, and I can just give it to the central bank, and it'll be like, here's a full 100 cents on the dollar.
Help me understand this. I'm going to keep asking because I like there's something in this whole the Federal Reserve central banking. I've tried to learn it like a dozen.
Here we go, guys. Shout out Meanbus. Meanbus says, I feel as though Quai is doing something no other blockchain or people are really working on, especially blockchain security. Oh man, appreciate the comment. Yeah, 100%. Um, we're not maximalists about much of anything except proof of work, guys. Proof of work gives you that economic finality, that economic security, that proof of stake just doesn't. And if you're wondering why we're doing it, clearly it's picking up where Bitcoin left off, and really, really interested to see what Andrew Cote has to say about this whole illusory facade that is fractional reserve banking and fiat.
Dozen times and somehow it doesn't stick. I think maybe because it's deep, it's fundamentally hallucinatory in some sense. Um, so it's just like I can't. There's I'm looking for this like self-consistent mental model, and it's not there. What do you mean when okay? So let's go back to SVB banking crisis. They had what was like what caused that crisis? I just remember it was the increase in interest rates
Mhm.
beyond what people had forecast, and so what does
Well,
that
so,
mean? Oh,
yeah,
so
yeah.
if
So
I
basically,
held
what happened
treasury
is
bonds that have a fixed yield rate, but now the current interest rate goes above those,
mhm,
that the relative value of those bonds now goes down.
the liquidation value of those bonds. So if you hold them to maturity, you'll still get the full value of the bond, but the
Yeah,
instantaneous value is below a dollar.
right.
Right. So when it went from 2.2% up to 5.5%, they had been buying all this long maturity debt at 2.2.
And so why this was incredibly impactful to SVB guys is because of all the investment at the end of COVID that was going into startups and tech companies who were scaling ad nauseum because they believed everybody was going to be locked in their houses for the foreseeable future. Investors doubled down on tech companies, and so tech companies were paying expenses employees based on those investment dollars that they were receiving effectively on loan. When this happened, what they just described, and the demand for those tech products didn't increase and they opened up the doors and everybody went back to living their normal lives, all these tech companies had to pay all their expenses with their bank accounts. And SVB did not have enough money for all those tech companies to withdraw. So they ended up crashing.
So
Yeah,
now, if people came and they said, like, we actually want to collect on our dollars, they only had bonds, and the bonds were worth less now. So they actually had a gap in, you know, their book, right? They were
yeah,
underwater,
yeah.
Boom.
right? So then the Fed stepped in and basically said, give us all your government debt, and we'll give you the full value of the bond for it right now, so that the system doesn't collapse.
Hmm. And so basically,
However, this was not isolated to just SVB and a few regional banks, folks. Like, this trickled across the world. And what most people don't realize is one of the oldest investment bank in the world closed up shop. Credit Suisse was a major Swiss global investment bank and financial services firm known for wealth management and investment banking, but faced severe financial difficulties leading to its emergency takeover by rival UBS in March 2023. How long had Credit Suisse been around? Since 1856, a 170-year-old institution, one of the most notorious banks in the entire world, closed up shop. Nobody's talking about it.
basically, the, is that now the shortfall in this book value was just adopted by the Federal Reserve?
Yes.
Okay, and because they don't have to be solvent or something,
They're the
that
origin of the money
yeah. So basically, that money was just created
out of
and
thin air.
given to banks.
Yeah.
And so okay, so the banks just like were too important to fail. And I mean, actually, I would say, like in hindsight, it's I think the Federal Reserve was giving guidance that they were not going to be increasing the rates, and then they basically rug pulled everyone by increasing the rates super fast. And so this was like sort of this like it's I don't know how much fault lies with where. I mean, the system itself sounds like it's fundamentally nonsensical, but I
Yeah,
think it
well, I mean, so one of the things in the design of Quai that, and this is just blockchains for you too, is I would say a blockchain technically is not technically a technical system. It's actually just a definition of markets, and there's only like a couple things that bind the markets to a technicality, so to speak, which is like your hash function, your sort of emissions policy. But a properly designed blockchain is just creating a series of markets. So the reason we did that is because we don't have the hubris to say that we can predetermine what should or shouldn't be. All we know is that efficient clearing of markets is good design because the collective intelligence operates on them, right?
Hmm.
And so the problem that you see with the Fed isn't the Fed itself
Supposedly
because
147 is a clippable
you're
moment.
giving them an impossible situation to actively control an economy, right? But if it was a market and the market had a fair way to discover the rates and that
Hmm.
resolved like correctly because say you had hard money instead of like Fugazi money, right? Um, then the collective intelligence of the market would find equilibrium. But basically, we've then put this intermediary that has the power to create money, and then we're also telling them to manage the market
Hmm. Hmm.
using that power, which is like the flaw, right? So you don't get the collective intelligence, you're never going to get it right, no matter how smart you are.
Yeah, I think that's really good framing, and I think that is the power of markets is this intelligent superorganism that emerges via all of our individual decision making, and you can't really. I mean, I don't know. Maybe like a ASI Federal Reserve would work or something like that. But I think that's actually. I mean, this is another thing. You know, Elon, our space king in low orbit heaven, said
Our
recently was
space
that.
king in low orbit
You know, you
heaven.
could maybe get ASI through like a bunch of interacting AI agents or something like that. Like, and I think that's maybe, you know, because I think like the market and the economy is a super intelligence. It is solving a coordination problem that no one person can solve on their own. It is smarter than any human by far. Like in its
Yeah, I think the statement would be true. You'd have to have enough diversity of the agents and their
uh,
information sources.
right.
But if
Here we go,
because
guys.
that's where it comes from, right? Like if you look at the
How does Quai Network solve the AI alignment problem? More people need to be talking about this. More people need to be talking about this, guys. It's there's so much opportunity when you can see chi as an energy dollar and an energy-based monetary system at scale. The solving of the meta crisis is just huge.
resilience of that collective intelligence, it's
Yeah.
diversity in both like relative subjective pricing, future expected values, information asymmetries, right? You would need that level of diversity to get it from like an
Yeah.
artificial system. But given that, I mean, let's be honest, we're similar, right? We're the wet version of it, but like we're more and more analogous. I don't think they're quite there yet. I don't think that the way that we do generalized networks, right? I think that if you look at the brain structure, that evolved for very good reasons, and the fact that we sub-optimized certain parts of it or optimize certain parts to do very specific processing, so that's like an optimized neural net for spatial awareness, an optimized one for language, an optimized one for vision, an optimized one for this and that, and then we put a meta web over it. Um, I think that there's something to be said for that, and I haven't seen somebody do that in the AI space.
Mm.
Um, but but the point is they're getting sufficiently complex that you can get very stochastic emergent behaviors. You just have to again have
Yeah.
great enough diversity of those things, and yeah, you'll get the same outcome.
I'm curious what you think, and I mean, this could be our last tangent, just because like you have to come back more. We can just keep riffing on stuff. Um, I've had this view. You can maybe say it's wrong or right. I don't know, but that you know, cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, it seems like that will naturally be the market on which AI agents
Here we
or
go, guys.
you know intelligent like or sorry artificial intelligence if we give them purchasing power and that kind of stuff, it sounds like they natively have to transact on those formats. Or oh, what's this? Is this
Oh, I just put it back to live here. Yeah.
okay? Cool. Have you guys thought about that at all in this kind of like and this is kind of like the Charles Strauss like accelerando sci-fi where you know economic agents now, if they're AIs, and I mean already there's like trading models that do this, but more generally if they're like involved with running a company and making purchasing decisions. And I know Amazon does this internally, is like it's you know where they source things and all this kind of stuff, it's automated in some sense. Have you guys explored this intersection? I guess like AI agents, robotics, blockchain.
Yeah, well, so what I think is the most interesting is the reward function in society. So right now we have political money, and um, the reward function in society does not optimize for um, aggregate well-being and wealth because we have political money.
Mhm.
It offers people outside rewards that can use politics to manipulate things in their favor, uh, to potentially blackmail and bribe people. So you get this, you know, sort of kleptocratic, self-reinforcing bureaucratic system of. Still haven't seen the Epstein files. That's all I'm saying there.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But like those are outcomes of political money. Is that you get political outcomes. You don't get outcomes that increase the aggregate wealth. If you reframe that money to be energy based, and then goods and services are all pricing in this energy, right? Then going back to that graph you mentioned, right? Energy is sort of the best metric for correlating a well-developed, prosperous society, right? So if I can make my reward function tightly tied to energy, i.e., human well-being, we'll actually get way better societal structures and outcomes because the political ones will no longer work. And so if I were to try to extend this analogy to AI and say, how do we make AI safe and the outcomes of AI benefit us rather than something else happening, it would be aligning the reward function of the AI with the well being of the humans, which is energy based money. So I actually think of all the systems that we could come up with to put guardrails on AI, it's really just reformulating the reward function in such a way that it's so tightly integrated to the physics of human well-being and can't be manipulated that it causes all AIs to work in a benevolent way towards the betterment of human well-being.
Boom.
Hmm. That's very interesting. I I I think I would like broadly subscribe to that view. I think with the additional caveat that it's like the AIs themselves are truth seeking. They're truly empiricist. We are not biasing again, but it's kind of like a political thing. Like we're not biasing them into believing things that are convenient or nice or feel good or something like that when they are not true or something like
Well,
that.
but I don't need to know their motivation. I just need to know what they're motivated towards, and that's aligned with like human interest.
Right, right. Which is, I mean, and that's where we started. It's the abundance availability of free energy, right? Our ability to
Do you guys get that? I think this is absolutely a meta that's going to pique a lot of ears in 2026. So ultimately, AI will always be incentive driven, right? And currently, what does AI need? It needs energy. The best way to get energy is via political money, right? So the incentives for society are not aligned with humanity, which means AI is not aligned for humanity, right? The incentives in our economy is not aligned with humanity. But even if AI is indirectly profit driven, if that money is based in energy, right? AI will be incentivized to maximize the efficiency of energy and seek out more abundant sources of energy for everybody, right? So in an energy-based monetary system, AI is aligned with humanity by default. That's my TLDR.
acquire, produce, consume this energy. And so I don't know. I mean, I think I'd close with this. It's like we got to be Kardashev scaling. We got to be Kardashev maxers, right? And so having a energy based currency is seems like an inevitable component of that, the future economy.
Yeah, I would add on to that and say that I don't think we've ever actually had capitalism.
Oh, it's a hot take.
I think the structures which we have called capitalism has some characteristics of it, but we've never had pure capitalism. Um, so I think it will be interesting if you can vastly increase the efficiency of the information system, the money, and redirect the reward function away from politics to truly increasing well-being. Um, I think that could be like the biggest step we've had, and like that's like an epoch of mankind right there,
Yeah.
because those efficiencies are going to compound every day, right? And sometimes we like lose sight of that. I'll give you two examples of sort of compounding efficiencies. Um, if you had a dollar and you managed to double that dollar every year for 20 years, you'd have $1 million. If I took 25% tax on that every year, what do you have at the end of 20 years?
I don't know.
65,000.
Damn, dude.
Yeah.
Brutal.
So
Yeah.
the 25% tax actually steals 94% of your wealth.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is now especially relevant with like kind of uncovering this, like the extent of government fraudulent spending and wanting to tax things more, right? um I think it's like it's indefensible, but
But the thing is,
yeah.
there's no pushback on it. There's no tie. There's no grounding, because the system is arbitrary. The system is fictitious. They can just take the money from us, right? And they can
Yeah.
just print more. They can either directly take it, or they can just print more of it and take it. So they can tax us on savings and on earnings, right? And in a system like that, there's no accountability. So you end up with the Somali daycares, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But if the system is self-sovereign, meaning I can actually own my money as an asset independent of a bank, and that money can't be manipulated, we can still have social systems. You just are going to have to justify what you're doing, and rational people will participate.
And that's probably like the biggest barrier to adoption here, is the fact that it makes this corruption, grift, fraud, theft, abuse impossible. And that has become so baked into like the state of affairs, the revolving door between industry, policy, and government, and all this kind of stuff, that you know like the it's so brutal, but it's true that like the extent to which this fraud can persist is really measurable by the extent to which the public can be deluded as to their own self-interest and manipulated by usually emotional narratives to whip them up into a certain belief system. And it's like, this is like the feel good fund for XYZ, and the money's actually used for just like, I don't know, whatever, like political lobbying or buying a second house in Vermont, or whatever,
Well, I
right?
mean, look at all the senators. They all are worth tens of millions of dollars.
Exactly. Yeah,
How does that work,
exactly. Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
with the um, interesting thing there is that you kind of start to go full circle on like fix the money, fix the world.
Yep.
So why is it that Bitcoin isn't good enough? It's not good enough because people
Absolutely,
can't
Matto.
hold it themselves and use it every day,
I'm just gonna call you Matt
right?
from
If
now
I
on.
can get it so that a mom is buying her groceries with it and filling up her van with gas with it, that creates a degree of social resilience, um, and that creates it also just removes the economic power, right? So if suddenly everyone started using chi, the dollar would be worthless, right? If the dollar's worthless, then you can't hold up this house of graft and corruption,
Hmm.
right? So fundamentally, like it's so pernicious. Say what you will of Donald Trump, like he went there trying to like slice it up, right? Trying to remove waste and efficiency with the help of Elon. But even with that much aggressive action, there's a very limited effect that you can have on such a large system, right?
Hmm.
The only
Hmm.
way that you can reset it is by resetting the base, which is the money. So the money that we're designing has to be adopted from a grassroots perspective by people because it's in their own best interest to do so. That means it
Hmm.
has to be easy enough to use, cheap enough to use, and show clear enough benefit that you just start using it because it's better. And once you get to that point, then you actually have fixed the money, which will allow you to fix the world.
Boom.
Damn, dude. Well, then what is your call to action here? Like, what can people do, or what are you guys looking for? Also, like, are you guys hiring? Are you looking for new collaborations? Is there like easy ways for people to get involved or adopt it? Is is it like we need more stores that would accept this as a currency, or is there some kind of like adoption rollout plan? Like, how do we get people using this?
Yeah, I mean, it's all of the above, right? So we spent a lot of time like figuring this problem out before we went live. So the genesis of the idea of Quai actually happened in 2018, and it was a research project for a while, National Science Foundation funded, and then in 22, the beginning, we got funding to kind of do it full time. But we spent another 3 years getting it to the point that it like worked before we went live. So we didn't sort of ship something and then spend a decade trying to fix it. We
Mm-hmm.
shipped the thing that we think we can scale.
Took
So that
almost a
being said,
decade to
we're
build it.
still in the first year of this thing actually being live. But people coming to work for Quai, right? Buying Quai is obviously helpful, helping us get better accessibility to Quai. So if there's a wallet that we can get integrated to or an exchange that you can help get a listing on, those are all helpful things. And there's also, building of applications and whatnot on the system. One of the things that's really cool about Quai is because it's so fast and so cheap, you can actually build an application and you can scale the application. In many situations we see with blockchain, you get sort of a product market fit of a you know Uniswap as an AMM, or you get a CryptoKitty NFT, and it starts to sort of take off. But because the chain itself can't scale, it sort of kills a lot of these ideas in their crib because the idea can scale, the use case can scale, but the chain can't. So one
Mm-hmm.
thing that's cool about Quai, because we spent all of this time making sure that it can scale, is that if you actually build something on it that's useful, the chain will scale with you, which isn't something anyone's ever really been able to say. Um, so there's a lot of cool applications that take advantage of this and kind of make it so that Web3 looks very much like Web2, and we're not doing it in a centralized way. We're not doing it with proof of authority or some sort of L2. It's all happening on the main chain, and it feels very much like a normal web-based experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is awesome, man. I think this is awesome. And I'll just reiterate, I've never been like a crypto guy. I've never been like into stuff. And I kind of came to this point of energy-based currency as like
Oh, boom. Wait.
for like business development, economic growth. It has this massive part you talked about, which is this like political theft, fraud, abuse that can occur because it's ultimately political money. And then even that, it's debt-based money, and so there's the
We're catching up
systemic
on the stream.
instabilities are rampant. But there's all this like just cool stuff. Like it's the causally invariant hypergraph computation. It has like these correspondences to fundamental physics. So I think what you're working on is it's really cool. It's really cool. I don't know. I maybe I should probably buy some Quai or something at some point. I don't know. I don't like. I've never been
Yeah,
like a speculative investor, but
yeah. I mean, from my perspective, right? I got into Bitcoin early, so I don't like have to be here, so to speak.
yeah.
Um, but there's like two roads that we're kind of going down as a society. We maintain our digital world, and that advances. We have one road which looks like a CBDC, a la USDC or USDT,
So what
which
is
is going
CBDT?
to, create a panopticon that is going to be very pernicious for human freedom. And then the other road that we can go down. Sorry, 1 second. 开，关掉了，谢谢。The other road we can go down is one where we, actually realize sort of the dream of Satoshi, which was P2P electronic cash, and we create a money system that is truly independent, truly decentralized, truly uncontrollable. And then we've built the tool that potentially will create, this blossoming of human freedom and creativity in a
2,300
digital world.
views on the
But if we
stream.
don't
Let's go,
realize
guys.
that, we're going to get ourselves into a situation that I think is like incredibly bad for an incredibly long period of time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, like, the reason that I'm building Quai is because no one else was building that second system, and this is like my best effort at doing that.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being here. And hey, we got 2,200 people watching live. So where can people find you guys? Where can they follow along as the last thing?
Yeah, you can check out our website at qu.ai. You can follow me on Twitter. Handles Mechanical K, spelled Kalk at the end. You can also follow a Quai Network account. We also have an active Discord. So if you're a developer, want to build some apps, want some direction, drop in our Discord and we can help you out. If you want to
Awesome.
mine, right, with SOAP or 3 algo mining now, you can mine with uh, a GPU, a script ASIC, or a SHA ASIC. So you can contribute that hash rate. Um, yeah,
Awesome.
lots to contribute. So
And come out to Austin Deep Tech Week, right? We're gonna do, I think, end of April. So I'll stay tuned on more to come. But thanks again for your time, man. Really appreciate it.
yeah, appreciate it, Andrew.
Okay, cool. All right. Take care.
Oh man, that was a good one. Thanks for hanging in there with me, folks. Matt says a bit of a side topic. I've been politely shilling Quai to Caspa holders on X lately. I'll just say Caspians totally understand scaling proof of work, so have mad respect for Caspians. Uh, Matt says there was a good post yesterday we'll find later from a longtime CAS holder stating facts on why the price keeps heading south. Long-term holders need to put dollars in to promote the coin for adoption, and also their volume is very low compared to others on exchanges. Maybe not a huge issue as that's what the exchanges look at. Yeah, I think I saw that post, man. We get a lot of flack from folks who are hardcore cypherpunk decentralization maxis. That Quai Network has a development firm behind it that has some VC backing. Um, but it's clear at this point that if you want to have an organized effort behind promoting a token, building out tooling, getting listed on exchanges, you need a concerted effort and a war chest in order to actually go and get that done. So, one of the things I like to tell folks who they often use the term fair launch, um, is that yeah, you know, totally fair that there was a $3 billion or 3 billion token pre-mine in Quai, but Chi, the most important innovation that Quai Network is bringing to this space is 100% fair launch. Right? There was no pre-mine of Chi. All the supply of Chi was either mined or swapped. In other words, Quai was burned in order to create it by its users. So yeah, early days. When if you're trying to get a project off the ground, you need money for partnerships and exchange listings and whatnot. It's the only way to compete. So the good news is, if you look at some of these other VC-backed tokens that have like hundreds of millions of dollars in them, Quine Network ultimately launched with about 20 million in capital raised. So we thought through this, um, methodically, right? We needed a war chest in order to go to market, but we definitely did not want to give, folks like exchanges and market makers an opportunity to rug retail, dump on retail, or any of that jazz. And obviously, Quiet Network has benefited from that, right? The reason why we're listed on the exchange we're listed on, the reason why we have the partners we have, the reason we can pay a small team salaries in order to sit here and promote the project, work on the project, provide tools and updates, and have the time and freedom to think and develop things like Project Soap is simply because we had some initial investment and a war chest in order to do that. So long term, it's actually written in the foundation documents that as soon as that war chest is no longer needed, those tokens will be burned, right? So the ultimate goal, you might hear Dr. K say, is to build Quai Network with and launch it with all the features it needs to work like a mold spore and just grow naturally and organically. And as soon as we get to that point, I definitely expect all those tokens that the foundation holds to be burned. But you need a little bit of you need a spark and so a dedicated team to get that ball rolling. So with Project Soap, though, probably one of the biggest flywheels that I've ever seen in terms of A, its potential, and B, its effectiveness out the gate. So that's why we are super excited about Project Soap. It just makes uh, a lot of this so much easier. It really speeds up adoption and discovery through price action. And so, we're really excited over here. I hope you guys are as well. Yeah, can't have your cake and eat it. Yeah, you need both. You need both. So, I mean, again, like if you care about, you know, um, unstoppable, untraceable money, like the Monero folks say, the token on Quai Network that is, unstoppable and untraceable is Chi, and it is 100% fair launch, right? So there was no pre-mine of probably the biggest innovation the world has yet to see, which is Chi, the globally scalable, fully decentralized energy dollar. So that's how I approach those conversations, and it's clear to at least some Caspians that a little bit of funding and organization would go a really long way. The best open source projects that have ever existed um, depend on an organized team and dedicated funding, right? You can think of like Linux, all these open source applications that basically run the entire internet. Like, yeah, they're open source. Yeah, they're um, managed by a foundation. But yeah, they get regular investment. They have a dedicated team. Um, and that's how they ensure that product and project continues to make progress. So while it is very, very cypherpunk to get a bunch of anons together to build something amazing to take over the world, uh, it is almost such a monumental task, and this mission so important that I don't think you should depend on that or let that sway you from judging a project for its merits. So that's my hot take there. Um, let's see here. Switching topics briefly. I got to move on to the next thing here pretty soon, but appreciate everybody who tuned in. Again, guys, soap.q.ai is where you can track that flywheel that I was talking about. You might have noticed a decent drop in revenue here. That is due to the Raven coin happening, going from 2,500 blocks per or 2,500 Raven per block down to 1250. The market right now is red across the board. Sounds like some nations are not really excited about Trump getting super hawkish on Greenland. And I think yeah, he threatened tariffs as well against Denmark. So looks like there's some economic warfare going on here, folks. While we're at it, might as well check in on one of my newer favorite accounts. Let's see if PsyOp Anime has anything for us today. Doot, 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 doot. That's January 19th. Today's what, the 20th? Yeah, nothing new from PsyOp Anime, but dang, guys. Looks like looks like the European Union is not happy with Donald Trump, and they are selling the America trade right now. Um, dang. Let's news.google. See if we can get Business. Everybody's talking about. US. Man, there's a lot of chaos happening in this space. Speaking of Ray Dalio, I mentioned that earlier. I am currently reading his book, uh, Principles on the Changing World Order. He put out a tweet today. Actually, yesterday. He says, it's now happening. The existing fiat monetary order, the domestic political order, and the international geopolitical order are all breaking down, so we are at the brink of wars. It all is happening because of the big cycle that is driven by five big. Oh, he's gonna promote his own framework here. But do you you know this is actually a really good video.
I studied the 10 most powerful.
It's interesting. I highly recommend you guys take a look at this because uh, uh, Ray Dalio's got receipts, guys. He definitely has receipts. Now, the one problem I currently have with Ray Dalio's framework is he doesn't seem to care what kind of monetary system is being used in these cycles. Um, so I believe that you know, absent of, that knowledge, his analysis of, the big cycle and the principles for the changing world order are pretty accurate. That being said, I also believe that if we fix the money, these cycles could change, right? And his definition of these cycles could absolutely change because what I see in his cycles, if you understand the history of fractional reserve banking, it's pretty clear that fiat and fractional reserve banking play a huge role in the outcomes of these cycles. So if we completely eliminate fiat and fractional reserve banking, um, we could break the trends that he believes are true. So shout out Ray Dalio. Again, this guy's got receipts, so it's not a voice that should be ignored. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, he's got an amazing YouTube video. It's only 5 minutes long that breaks it all down. I'm reading his book right now, and so there's even more context, obviously, within his book. Not sure if I recommend it quite yet. Definitely recommend The Creature from Jekyll Island, guys. If you're in crypto and you're in crypto like we are, for the same similar reasons, separating money from the state. The Creature from Jekyll Island is not just about the fractional reserve banking system. It is also a great take on the history of banking writ large and the history of money. So, what inspired me from that book is ultimately, we've never seen a major shift in the definition of money in our lifetime. Unless you're like Ray Dalio and lived through, remember the removal of the gold backing of the U.S. dollar. But fractional reserve banking still existed then. However, in our history being America's history, there's been multiple times when our entire society has switched monetary bases. And so what's inspiring is that this is absolutely something that can happen. We can change the world for the better. And society keeps chugging along. So it's not so dramatic as you might think if you have a better understanding of history and where we came from and how we got here. So highly recommend that book. But yeah, markets are not good today, guys. Not good today. We're living through interesting times. Man, just down. Wow, look at all that red. It's just down across the board. What is that? Gold? Pax Gold is up. Who would have thought? And Tether Gold is up. Who would have thought? Hmm. Hmm. Are there patterns here? Are you guys seeing the patterns here? Man, interesting stuff. So anyways, guys, like I said, SOAP is chugging along. I definitely don't expect Quai Network to continue its current downtrend for much longer. Definitely more buybacks and burns coming in hot. Kapow hash rate continuing to increase, and more miners joining the network. I feel like we're going to go through phases here. So if we look at, we only have a 7-day timeline here, but there's going to be periods where new hash rate comes online and feels out this 2-week lock, and then once they get over that hump, we'll see more hash rate get committed. So we're probably in one of these slumps where a new population of miners are, quote unquote, experimenting. So I definitely expect this hash rate to continue to climb in the coming week. So keep your eyes peeled for that. More hash rate, the better. Again, guys, the more hash rate equals more buybacks equals more buy pressure pre-token unlocks. So this is a positive only flywheel from this point forward. Um, yeah, glad to have you guys here. Thanks for tuning in. Again, guys, I believe I tipped everybody some Quai who joined us in chat. If you're hanging out and you're not sure what's going on, go sign up for Kipper.money. It's how Quai Nation shares Quai over on X and engage with us on X. Pretty much anybody and everybody who is, uh, engaging with the Quai Nation over on X earns some Quai via tips on their posts. Let's see what the leaderboard looks like right now. Top tippers. Oh man, Christopher's smashing it again. Oh dang, Steph coming in with the big bags. One massive tip just to crown himself king over there. But looks like I'm just Christopher and I are neck and neck on tips right now, guys. So probably up here due to the game we just played with CS:GO Don. That was fun. Maybe we'll play another one tomorrow. But go sign up for Kipper Money, guys. It's a great way to earn some Quai. If you need some more Quai, we are traded on Mexi, Gate.io, and LBank. And Kraken is right around the corner, folks. So you're still early here at Quai Network. You can swap those useless tokens for more useful ones over at Let's Exchange and Swap Space. You can now buy Quai, quote unquote, buy Quai over at buyquai.com. That's simple. Um, Looks like it supports Ethereum, BNB, and Solana. And you can swap USDT for Quai over here. That's super cool. No KYC, no geo blocks. Really easy way to get your hands on some Quai. And lastly, make sure you give the account a follow. Let's retweet these spaces, guys. We're getting real close to 1,000 followers. Once we hit 1,000 followers, we'll start doing some Tangent hardware wallet giveaways. So best hardware wallet on the market for the money. Quai branded, nice and fancy, sealed in packaging for you guys. Brand spanking new. Hope to hand those out soon. Looks like we only need 40 followers before we start doing some Tangent giveaways. So we're going to move on to the next thing. Really appreciate you guys for tuning in. Quai Nation, you guys absolutely rock. We will catch you tomorrow in Discord for a Tech AMA with Dr. K. But with that, I'm going to say have an amazing night, morning, day, wherever you're at in the world. You guys rock. Beanbus, Matt, CSGO, Dan, all you guys. Love y'all. Peace out.